Welcome everyone that's here for the Centerville City Council meeting being held on September 20th. We had a work session before this meeting where we heard from our tree board committee, which was very good, and from our Whitaker Museum board. Both of those were very good presentations and great discussions. So we welcome you here tonight. And we welcome those in attendance. We welcome those that may be in Zoom. Let's go around the room, starting to my far left, and have the council members do a roll call.
Meekum present.
Yance present.
Hurst present.
Summerhays present.
McEwen present.
Thank you, council members, for all five are present, and thank you for being here tonight. We will begin with a legislative prayer of thought, and it will be given by myself, and that will be a prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're very grateful for the opportunity that we have to be here this evening on this beautiful September day that we have. We're grateful for the area that we live in. We're grateful for the founding fathers of this area and of this country and of this state and all that they have done to provide these freedoms that we experience. Help us to be wise stewards and to exercise that same caution and preserving our the freedoms that we are granted under our Constitution and other documents of law. We're thankful for all those that work on our behalf here at the city. We're thankful for all the residents that work so hard and volunteer so many hours. We're thankful for all that is done in this community, and we are grateful to be a part of it, and help us to be wise stewards of that this night. Help us as we have discussion that we may discuss with civility and that we may be able to show that kindness towards each other. Now help us that we can have thy wisdom with us this night, and this we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, let's rise and repeat the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item we have on the agenda, this is an open session. We only have one public hearing matter tonight, and this is on a zone map amendment on the Hillside overlay lots 101, 102, 103 of the Rockwood Farm subdivision. So there'll be time for that. If you're here to comment on that, you don't need to talk in this open session, but any other items that you're welcome to bring up, we would just ask that you introduce yourself and where you're from, and try and keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes. So that open session is now available for those that would like to participate.
Hello, my name is Julianne Zollinger. I live at 1007 North 300 East in Centerville, Utah. And I'm here to talk about the agenda item of the intersection between Chase Lane and 400 East that's up for your discussion tonight. First off, I'd like to really thank everybody for reaching out to us. We've had lots of council members, lots of city employees reach out to us, and we're very grateful for that. And we're also very grateful for the report that you had done, commissioned, because it gave some great ideas, and I think will lead us in the right direction. And we're really here tonight hoping to come to an amicable agreement. The first thing I wanted to bring up is that most of the discussions we had with city officials and city employees about this intersection were done prior to us actually obtaining a copy of the report. And so a lot of our information was taken by their interpretation of what was in the report. And after these conversations, the original idea was to come up with boulders, placing boulders along the park strip, because the city didn't feel like they could put any barrier in due to liability to drivers. At that time, before we had received the full report, we thought that might be a idea. We'd need boulders at least 3 feet tall, so we could bury them an inch or a foot deep and then have the 2 feet above ground, which would fit inside the city ordinance of 24 inches. That's something that we felt could possibly prevent the cars from coming through our property. But the problem with that is the burden seemed to fall fully on the owners. And as we got bids, several, but they were all over $10,000 to put in those. And that seemed like a pretty heavy burden. The other suggestions that were brought up were signage and road treatments. And although those are very much needed and I think would be very well appreciated and help that intersection, it did nothing to actually prevent cars from breaching our property line once more and causing such damage. So one of the underlying feelings that we keep getting as property owners is the city has this great legal burden or obligation to the driver of the vehicle. And so I started poking around and doing some research, and I sent a letter out earlier today to the council, Lisa Romney, the city attorney, just to clarify that legally the city also has an obligation to property owners. Under Utah Code Section 63G-7-301, 2H, a citizen can bring a claim against a governmental agency as to an injury caused by a defective, unsafe, or dangerous condition of any highway, road, street, alley, crosswalk, or sidewalk. And that injury can be to either person or property. I think that this intersection fits that requirement because the city has known this intersection to be dangerous for over 50 years. In fact, before the early 1980s, there was a barrier in that park strip. It prevented accidents from breaching the property line. For some reason, it was removed in the 1980s, and since that point, when my family bought the house in 1988, we've had 10 accidents where cars have breached that property line. This is a known defective, unsafe, or dangerous road. I would also like to point out that in 2019 accidents, the driver was uninsured, and so between our homeowner's insurance and our own personal funds, we paid close to $9,000 to repair the damage that we could have claimed. And I didn't know about this before, but I know about it now. And so in that letter, I also attached a possible notice of claim. That's something that we file. We have the standing, we have the ability to do that, both us and the Hague, have a current claim against the city. Now, we haven't done anything legally yet. We haven't sought representation. We haven't officially filed that notice of claim, but I just wanted to bring that up so that maybe that balance could be shifted a little bit and you stop focusing on the liability to the driver and start focusing a little bit more on the liability to the property owner, because you have one. And I think also you're forgetting that insurance companies can come and subjugate for you, because at this point, you know that's a dangerous intersection and you could do something to prevent that car from causing so much damage. If there had been a barrier there, it could have prevented that car from coming through both properties and causing so much damage, which now that insurance company has to pay. And so they could start easily coming after the city for the costs that they have to pay out time and time again. As we've gone through this, now that we have a copy of this, and we now know that there is a burden by the city to protect our property legally, we would like to look further at this report. One thing that was not brought up to our attention that we feel like is a very valid and amicable solution would be under curb extension. It reads, curb extension along 1000 North across from 400 East would also increase the distance of the edge of the pavement from the proximate neighbor. This change would increase the time and space available for a vehicle to slow down before impacting the homeowner. In addition, a curb extension on that side of the road would provide additional space to install barriers or landscape that could physically slow or prevent vehicles from reaching the property owner's land. So one of the biggest things we got from you guys is that you can't put anything in the curb because you don't have enough room. You don't have a 12-foot barrier or breakaway space. But we put this little packet together for you guys. Talks about curb extensions, lets you know and see what they look like. And if you flip to the second to last page or the third page or the fourth page, it shows an example of how a curb extension could be placed on that property line. That road is larger than others. It's the third page.
We only have one.
Oh, there was another one. Come on, George. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So I want you to just look at that because we did all the measurements. Chase Lane is currently 43.5 feet from curb to curb. The other residential roads around that area are 34 feet, so you have plenty of room. From curb to our property line is almost 7 feet. It's like 6 feet 11 inches. So you would need to bump out 5 feet into Chase Lane on a curb extension. If you did that, the Chase Lane would still be 38.5 feet. That's bigger than other residential roads in that area. We stood out there and watched buses. They have no problem making a turn with that curb extension. And with that curb extension, you would be able to put a barrier, have your 12-foot breakaway requirement, and provide any cars from coming through our property again. And that is really our biggest concern, is that that is taken into consideration, not just improvements to signage and roads, but actually protecting our property from further damage, because otherwise we'll just come every time that happens and make a claim against the city's insurance to get reimbursed for that. Additionally, a curb extension would protect pedestrians that walk across that street, because you would have a barrier for them, so they would be safe. I think that also needs to be brought up that a crosswalk should be painted at 400 East, because that isn't there, and that is a major crosswalk. Like I mentioned before, there's the UTA bus and the high school bus stop there. It would prevent cars from causing so much damage. They would be stopped before going through our property. Insurance companies wouldn't have to be paying out so much. They wouldn't be coming after the city to subjugate that cost. It would also slow traffic. This may be an additional thing that we haven't considered. Chase Lane is known for speed as you come down that hill. Narrowing the road causes traffic to naturally slow down. And so that is a bonus to having this. Not only would it protect our property, but it would decrease speed on Chase Lane, which is a problem. So we encourage you to consider that. Boulders, we sent the one around with boulders for you guys to look at. That was, my husband made these up. Again, we'd need 14 boulders. They would weigh about a ton each, and that would cost us $10,000. If you guys would like to help pay for that, you can figure out a way to do that. That would be an option too, but I think the curb extension would be something the city could totally do on their own. It would be their own project, easily maintained. So that's my thoughts. I don't know if you have any questions. I would encourage you to open up the discussion for public hearing, so we can talk more, but thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Other items for the open session? Anybody online wanting to talk? If no other people for the open session, we'll move on from the open session. Close that. We'll go to the business items. The first business item we hear is the public hearing item that I talked about, the zone map amendment on the Hillside overlay lots 101 through 103 of the Rockwood Farm subdivision. And we're going to be introduced to this by Corey Snyder, our Community Development Director. Corey?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As indicated, this is a zone map amendment. A little bit different is this is looking at an overlay zone that sits on top of an existing base zone. The zone is residential low, and then the overlay in this area that's being looked at is the Hillside overlay ordinance, which adds additional regulations on top of the zone due to Hillside development. Mr. Knight initially to amend it to remove his lot from the Hillside overlay. That first meeting with the Planning Commission and the debate and discussion you should see in the staff report was to at least consider the lots on either side, because an overlay zone from staff's position is not just a singular piece of property. It's really trying to effectively address some larger issues in a single piece of property. The Planning Commission did accept that idea of expanding the petition to the lot owner to the north and to the south, so there would be 3 lots involved. It came back to a second meeting to the planning commission, then they debated it, and in their case, they made a 4-to-1 recommendation to you. Just to recap the discussion, Hillside overlay is designed to look at stormwater management, cuts and fills, geologic hazards, a lot of those type of elements. What happens in the hillside, so maybe I'll step back. As you look at the Bay Zone, when you build your house and make improvements to the property, you're restricted to only to 60% of your property can be. The rest of it, the water drain into the soil and manage itself. When you get into the hillside, it further restricts it, and it restricts it in several different ways. Depending on your slope, there's a 5,000 contiguous space. You can't use 30% or more slopes of your property to put any improvements on. But one of the elements that Mr. Knight has asked changes for is it takes that 60% for a lot and reduces it to 40%. And it's 5,000 square feet or 40%, whichever is less. So that's the interesting part of the Hillside Ordinance. To our knowledge, the subdivision that Mr. Knight is in was like 91, 92. We did have the Hillside Ordinance in place. There was a comparison to those lots that are 10,000 square feet. Those 3 lots are the smallest in that Rockwood Estates subdivision. A lot of the others are 12, 14, 15 subdivision. So these are the 3 smaller lots. Shadow Mountain to the west is also 10,000 square feet. If you look back in history, our lot size was R110 back then. So in certain areas, you had to have a 10,000 square foot lot at minimum. You can always plat larger, but your 10,000 square foot is a minimum. So that's why the 10,000 shows up in these lot sizes. City engineer looked at it, staff looked at it. Your point of where do you demarcate a hillside area? As we looked at it, the lots for subdivision, they're a lot larger lots and further west, and you can see that the transition of slope happens about midstream or so of those lots. If you look at the Rockwood subdivision and then you look at the Shadow Mountain directly, that transition mainly occurs in the Shadow Mountain, which is outside of the hillside. And then it transitions up, and then it's still slope. I don't want to say it's flat. It'll transition up when you get up on top above 610 East, then you get up to a flat tabletop area. So the issue is where do you demarcate that? The hillside overlay is left over from earlier than 2003 when we holistically redid the zoning ordinance. I don't know the history of demarcating the hillside and how and the criteria that they had when that ordinance was adopted. But the lots in question are in the hillside. The lots that are similar to the west are outside of the hillside. So it comes down to staff was trying to say, is there a need to maintain the led to the 4-to-1 vote? Staff looked at it and said, what's left is the stormwater management because the subdivision was built. And if the stormwater management can be managed on the singular piece of property, do we need to maintain those 3 lots in there? The conclusion of all of staff, when we looked at it, as the Development Review Committee said, we could probably not use this. This is probably an area that skips out onto the hillside, but was left there for some reason. It's not the steepest part. You have to get up further to the east to really get into the steeper part of the hillside. And so we were recommending the 3 lots be included into it rather than a singular lot. Planning Commission agreed. We held another hearing and expanded it. The majority of the Planning Commission reasoned the same argument that staff came to conclusion. I think Mr. Knight will give you some of his personal efforts of why he needs that change. One commissioner, Commissioner Mason Kerr, dissented. His issue was, again, it's a larger zone, and you're not just looking at a single piece of property. You're trying to accomplish the task of the hillside. If accomplishing the task of the hillside needs redoing, then we should be looking at the whole hillside and redoing it. And although he confessed, if you listen to the minutes of it, that that's the ideal planning situation, but practically, the decision to rezone it probably is the right practical reason, but maybe not the overall zone district reason. So
So his contention was, let's not just do 3 lots, let's do the whole hillside.
his contention seemed to see if there's some refined needs, let's look at the whole area first. So it's the cart and the horse kind of argument. But he did acknowledge that practically the decision for the 3 lots had some reason and merit, but he couldn't get there to vote for it on the planning side of the hat. You know, from staff's perspective, you could make either argument. Staff was uncomfortable with just a single lot, so we expanded it to the 2 adjacent 10,000 square foot roughly lots. So pragmatically, we took a little bit of, is there a need to preserve it? Pragmatically, it would help the property owners out. It looks like 2 of the properties through time, because we don't require permits for flat work and sheds under 200 square feet and things of that nature. It looks like from the early 90s to now, 2 lots are over the 40%. The 3rd lot, the owner's represented in the hearing that he's not over the 40%. He doesn't need it, but would like that option in the future. You might hear that repeated if I got it correctly from the meeting. So I think your arguments are both ways. We took the pragmatic approach with it. And so the Planning Commission ultimately 4-1 agreed with that. So the recommendation is to approve it for all 3 lots. But you could still debate the other merit of argument, just do 1 lot or do all 3 lots. It's really at your discretion at this point.
Did the planning commission advise staff to look at the whole hillside ordinance?
Didn't really make it a
The
goal.
overlay zone, sorry, not the ordinance.
No, they didn't really make it a goal. It seemed like the commission for the interim being maybe acknowledged that future work could be done, but didn't feel this decision necessitated an immediate response.
When we look at the hillside overlay zone, you're looking at a larger parcel. Do we know what the average slope of that subdivision is?
I don't know the
Pretty steep on the
average
east
slope.
side.
If you were to average it, you would include the lots that are bounding on the east boundary, which is very steep.
Well, across the street is not so steep.
Right.
No,
It kinda goes
it's,
steep on the
it's
west side
the
of 610
homes
east.
that hug the hill.
It kinda
It's
goes-
just that one row.
It's steep,
Yeah.
flattish, steep.
And, yeah, that steep part is touching that 30% grade. Maybe the engineer could give you a better guesstimate than I could, but I'm pretty confident that those eastern bound lots, 30% slope is you're dead into the hillside at that point.
For the homes on the east side of 610 East are essentially.
That's pretty flat
they're-
too.
Yeah,
they're
that's a-
on- they're
that's
on
a
grade.
tabletop.
There's no walkout basements, there's no, space above.
Yeah, I mean-
Are these 3 lots, is there any retaining at all? Like, it drops right off of Chase Lane as you go down that hill. Like,
Right,
I know those look pretty flat on 610.
I know that there's some retaining when you drive into the cul-de-sac. When I drove around there, and you can see the retaining on the lots outside of it, but I can't see through the fences and didn't walk into the property on the 3 lots.
As you go south, like house 867, I mean, there's 3 stories worth
Yeah.
of foundation walls back on that
Well,
home.
that gets incredibly steep.
Correct.
So our city engineer is like right here. And his lot's a little steeper. Sorry, Kevin, I'm pulling you in. Sorry.
So those 3 lots that are from the corner in, they're
991,
walkout
975.
basements, but they do not have any retainage. So there's probably 10 feet of fall on the lot, but with the walkout basement, you basically walk down the side yards without any retainage. So there, to my knowledge, are not any retaining walls on those 3 lots.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, that might be
That's just
the
fence,
fence.
but there, you have retaining walls on the backside of some of those.
Some of them. These are the 3 though that are definitely steeper lots.
Correct,
That's
but that are not included in the.
No.
More questions for staff? right down?
Yeah, can we get a map up of it? Sorry, Gina's cheating off my computer. Phil, so.
You had it so easily accessible.
Jennifer, you
Zoning
working
map
on
might be
that?
the easiest.
So you think, Corey, that Commissioner Kerr would have been fine, more comfortable with it had it been a discussion of a greater?
I think Commissioner Kerr was opening to altering the boundaries,
Yeah.
but felt like 1 and 3 lots was more of the cart rather than the horse.
Yeah. To him, it felt more like spot zoning?
That's a term thrown out into the minutes.
Okay, yeah.
But spot zoning for me, yes, you can say you don't want to do one piece of property, but you, in an overlay situation, I'm not sure as it goes as much as spot zoning per se. Lisa can correct me. Spot zoning is really legally based around that somebody gets a industrial use and somebody gets a house
No,
use.
I'm thinking in.
But yeah, but you
Yeah.
could, you could.
Using a metaphor,
Yeah,
sorry.
you could worry about how much are you favoring a piece of property though, and that leans into that spot zoning argument, is that you're favoring a particular piece of property over something else.
Yes, generally providing special privileges for one lot. The case law is now developed that it's not necessarily size, but, you're just picking and providing privileges or excluding that property from other rights. And I do think that as well, in terms of Commissioner Kerr's comments, the cart before the horse was, they need a deck, and he didn't want that to drive the decision of zoning, as well as.
That's true,
wanting
that's
to,
true.
That,
That's true.
You need to
Part
go
Right.
a little farther
let's analyze the
north, Jennifer.
geology.
When we talk about spot zoning too, I guess my
Chase
concern
Lane, if you
is,
can find Chase Lane.
A little
You're
further.
looking at-
Drag it a little further north. Yep.
There you go.
There you go. So, yeah, it's those first 3 lots, and then you have the 4 more.
Four
southerly
longer
that
lots
are
on the
A little more
south.
deep, that have the significant topography differences.
so my concern when we talk about spot zoning is you've got that triangular piece in there as well that frankly is also pretty flat. But then you have this really steep, slope with the ones that are right up against the mountainside. So I guess for me, I agree it's not spot zoning, but I still am looking at it and going, maybe we should be looking at.
No, I would agree with broadening it, because if you look at the tabletop area, the triangular piece, that's really flat, so you're not really regulating it from slope cuts and things of that nature. But the reason I didn't go that far in the expansion is because, where do you draw the line before you hit a study? And secondly, those are the large lots that can improve their property to a much greater degree and stay under the limitation, where the 3 lots at 10,000 are much more constrained. So basically that center area, they can improve their property much more viability than the 3 that are in the hillside.
And am I understanding this correctly, but is the subdivision to the west?
Shadow Mountain.
Shadow Mountain, we're thinking the hillside overlay zone was not in play when those were developed. Is
Yeah, I
that
look back
correct?
at the history and recording, that happened a few years after, or a few years before, I don't remember which one was which. It's early 90s. It was in Hillside then.
'Cause some of those lots seem,
Excuse me, the Shadow Mountain was not in the Hillside, Rockwood was still in the Hillside, so,
Shadow Mountain is the 2 circles.
yes.
yes.
So the hatching on the map is hillside overlay,
Correct.
correct? Okay.
Correct. But I would agree with the sentiment that there's probably more work on the overlay to do, particularly if we start upgrading our expectations like we need to, and then we look at new development potentials versus existing development situations. There's a lot of refinement that can be done.
And I think you're bringing up a good point, Corey, that those lots, if you look at the 3 versus the triangular piece, they're probably 150% bigger,
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
right, you're
yeah,
right.
they've
Those
got
are
up to
small
14,
lots.
15,000 square feet. They've got some larger homes. They have the ability, even though they're in the hillside, they still have ability to because you get up to 5,000 square feet or 40%, whichever is less, so the 40% on a 10,000 square foot lot, you're already half of it to get to the 5,000 square feet, so. They just think they had more room to build a house and more room to choose improvements than those 3 lots that stayed at the minimum R110 element. And if,
So for reference purposes, the 3 lots in the consideration are quarter-ish acre lots.
Yeah, they're like
And,
.23.
triangular lots, they're a third of an
0.4?
acre, 0.3 acres, 0.4.
Okay.
and the true intent, if you think about hillside development, if you think of an overlay, is you're supposed to make, on your steeper lots and your steeper areas, if your zoning was back then R110, it's supposed to drive it up because you have slopes. So your lot sizes get bigger because you're trying to find areas on that slope where a home can go. So leaving these at 10,000 square feet, the decision must have been that we didn't need to meet that higher level of making it a larger lot. But if you read the hillside, you're supposed to have 150 feet of frontage from the standard 60 feet of frontage. Or back then, I think it was 80 foot of frontage. And so you're supposed to make them larger and bigger because you're trying to say, we want to place a home and we want to place without having to do huge retaining work to get a home there and flatten out the yard. So even then, I think the hillside probably fell short in the plating of that subdivision, leaving those at 10,000. But I think practically for road alignment and maximizing it, they minimized those 3 lots when they platted the subdivision. So I think, just to be honest, I think there's holistically errors from the get-go in accomplishing the purpose. But that's my opinion. I don't know what they said back then.
Is this a new, I think it was the applicant's little written up thing, is this a new deck and a new pergola?
It's, he'll have to answer the pergola, I think that was built after, but there was an existing deck, it was demolished. He came in for a permit for a deck that's 6 feet wider, I think, and you can explain it. And that's when it was flagged in the building permit saying, hey, wait a minute here, we have a hillside. And tearing down the deck is what demolished the right of that deck. So we're already non-conforming. The last thing the zoning administrator's tasked to do is increase the degree of non-conformity.
What's the percentage of lot with the deck and the pergola? And are we at 60% impervious?
I'll let the petitioner do that because he's aware of those calculations. I think they are probably already over the 40, not including the deck, or close to. I know the north property, it's over, but I don't want to say by how much because I don't survey know.
Remind me what our coverage ratios are just on a basic flat lot down here.
A flat lot, 60% coverage.
So we're essentially talking about 4,000, 40% would be 4,000 impervious to 6,000. It's pretty, it's quite a bit more.
Well, we'll have a chance to hear from Corey again if you need to. Let's go to the applicant. Is the applicant here? Come on up, introduce yourself. It's your turn to present.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Mark Knight. My profession, I'm a CPA. I work for an LCFO in the Valley here. I come from Australia. I'm a US resident, been here 22 years now, been in that house since 2005. I also own a FedEx contract route that works out of the North Salt Lake hub, employing around 20 people in the local area. I guess a few errors happened on my behalf with going about this deck. We understood that after we demolished the deck that we could repair it piece by piece without invoking a permit issue here. So 2020 is hindsight, right? So we're we're at the point now where we demolished it because it was unsafe. 25 years of a timber deck, and it put my wife into hospital once when she put a screw through her foot, so it had to go, or I had to go, one of the two. So, in any case, it was torn down. It had cement underneath of it already, and the pergola area also had cement under it as a pad, and it was retained a little bit with some boulders. I've improved the retainage by putting block retainers there. It's under 4 feet, it's not that high. And that's to go around an RV pad that's previous owner concreted on there. I think the house gets it just over 40% on its own. And so I don't believe it complied even when it was built originally with the deck and the pad that was there for the pergola. Sorry, in Australia we call them pergolas. So I think what Corey had pointed out to my mind as being the pertinent fact here is retainage of the stormwater on the property, which is state code to do that. And so what we did is we put a plant box alongside the east perimeter of the property, a stone cinder block as a berm to berm any water from going down the hill. So it will be retained onto my property. On the south side and the north side, the slope is very slight and there's no water that actually rolls into my neighbour on the south side or onto the north side. It's all retained right now. And we've enjoyed some pretty good storms over the years and not had runoff going down to Devon Toon's house, which is immediately east of where we are. And he's on the lower side of us. So I will say that our slope on our property is very slight. It would be less than a 20% grade, which falls under the gradient required to go into an overlay situation. So just based on the facts of the way the land looks right now and no other cuts or anything, it's reasonably level. And Corey had also mentioned that the house north of me it has a swimming pool and a few other things. It's quite a bit over the 40%. My purpose is to see if we can get the overlay taken off so that we can have a house where we don't walk out of the house and fall down and break our necks out of 2 doors because we don't have a deck there anymore. So I have a deck plan and everything, to Corey's point, but we need to resolve this matter. And the proposed coverage of the property right now by extending the deck out 6 feet is the only increase to the original coverage of concrete on the property that was there before I demolished the deck. So there is still, in my estimate, around 35% that's pervious, a backyard, a side yard, and a front yard. There is a fairly large driveway that's at the front of the yard, and all of that water there is being retained in the front yard or going into stormwater drains from the driveway. And the backyard, as I said, has a berm with a plant box going the whole, almost the whole length of that east perimeter on the property. So the cart before the horse, yes, my objective is to get a deck. The way to get that there is to change this, but this fits into analysis that the slope isn't sufficient to make it in an overlay. And yes, I paid the amendment fee to do mine only, but I have had both owners of the properties either side of me attend both planning commissions, and one is here today for this meeting. And Neil will talk to that maybe later. So I don't have anything else. I think everything else is in the minutes that I talked about. Any questions? Or
Questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Mark?
So the deck is a little bit bigger than,
It extends out so that where the concrete was before, it extends about 4 feet, but the deck itself will go out about 6 feet.
If no further questions for Mark, let's go to the public hearing portion of this. So I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing on this.
Motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that means the public hearing is now open. That means anybody that wants to comment on this zone map amendment on the removing the hillside overlay on lots 101, 102, and 103 of the Rockwood Farm subdivision, please come forward. Just give us your name and where you're from for the record, those that do comment.
Okay, members of council, my name is Neil Brown. I live at 949 North, 610 East. I live just at the house just south of Mark. I am here in support of changing the overlay on that. I believe that Mark has that need there for being able to change that, especially in the sense of the safety for his house there, of having that deck repaired so he doesn't have a drop off outside of his back door on that he's had for quite a few months. Personally, I don't have the need for my house. I'm probably under the 40%. I don't necessarily have any plans right now, but I would probably prefer having the overlay taken off there for myself or for other future owners of the house there, of being able to have that option there, of being able to add to the property. But that's kind of where I stand. I stand in favor of making this change at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Further comments? Anybody online? Seeing no further comments, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, and we'll go back to any questions that council has for, any further questions for the applicant or for staff? Councilman Ince, did you have one, or are you ready to make a motion? You're thinking.
I'm debating.
I could see the
I think
wheels turning.
I would like to make a motion to approve the requested zoning map revision to remove the overlay zone on the 3 lots specified, 101, 2, and 3 in the Rockwood Farm subdivision.
I'll second that.
We have a motion, a second. Further discussion?
So this is an approval of ordinance 2022-19?
Yeah, we probably should clarify that. That's what you're doing, right, Councilman?
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm doing. I'm sorry, I was
Yeah,
looking at the detail.
okay. Thanks for that clarification, Councilman. Further discussion? All right, let's start with the Councilman Ince voting. So gave us the
Aye.
motion.
Aye.
I'm inclined to say aye, but I do want us to investigate this hillside overlay zone so that we, moving forward, are not picking 3 lots at a time or some lots, spot zoning, that type of thing. I can see in this case that this seems to be the appropriate move, but I'm concerned about future decisions that way, so I'll say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and in echoing your concern, this is something we should bring back to the Planning Commission to have them look at that overlay in general.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
As far as your comments about the area, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with that area. I built it right after I moved in. It's really spotty areas that ought to have special consideration, in my mind.
Yeah,
And the vast majority of it doesn't need it.
So maybe it can be improved to include contouring that matches that. Yeah.
Well, and you almost could do, our city engineer could help us maybe make some recommendations, but you could almost take a grade elevation from top back of curb on one side of the property, depending on if they're on the east or west side of the street, take an elevation from the property line east and property line west, or vice versa, depending, and that would help us identify specific lots within the Hillside overlay zone. That'd be interesting to get our city engineer's perspective if we can get the planning commission to take that up as a task, but.
And that's why I don't consider our action spot zoning tonight, because we are recognizing that there needs to be additional criteria.
Existing topography.
Right,
Topography,
right.
and that we're saying that we believe that the additional criteria should be applied so that it doesn't need to come back to us on a regular basis. So,
I just felt like the rear property line just seems so close there, but it meets what we would have in a otherwise typical lot, and that's why ultimately.
I'm only reacting to the spot zoning just so Corey could sleep at night.
Yeah.
Well,
Spot zoning.
and that probably was not the correct
Remember, that's a
term
metaphor.
to use.
It's a
No, I know it's a metaphor,
Yeah.
but you know.
Yeah.
That wasn't the correct term for me to use, but it doesn't negate the fact that I think we ought to look
No.
at this so that we can have a better opportunity of,
I'm not trying to give you a hard time
Inconsistent.
about it either. It's
okay, you
the best
can.
term to fit. It's just, in this case, I don't want to think that we did spot zone, because we really didn't.
right, I agree.
And Corey
We
can
should
sleep.
also not discount the fact that the hillside overlay is not just about topography, but like Corey said, some of it's related to our soils and aquifers and things
Right.
related to the surrounding areas, so we need to be careful of that.
And yeah, I mean, we talk about a piece of legislation that was written at a different time. Now we're into the optimization phase of what we can do with our land. It's fair to say some of these do require additional tweaks over time to be useful to the community and still be enforceable. So I'm totally okay with it.
So thank you, council, for that deliberation and thoughtful process into that. Corey and Lisa and Kevin and others, you've heard an assignment for Planning Commission, maybe to address this as a whole, because you had some hesitation from many council members there, so. Anything else, council, on that one? I do thank you for your thoughtful process, all of you, and deliberation on it. Let's,
I just say one last thing.
sure, you're welcome.
I neglected to say this in my opening remarks, that I was grateful for the Planning Commission and what those members, contributed towards getting to this decision. So I just
Thank you, Mark.
put that on public record.
They'll appreciate that too. All right, let's go to item number 2. This is traffic mitigation discussion on 400 East and Chase Lane. Now, you have this information in your packet, but it's going to be explained by those that prepared it. Obviously, between this information in the packet and the explanation tonight, and further information that we received tonight, and also during the day, that it may be something that you want to deliberate on, but we do want to get the information out, so you do have the information in front of you to think through the various options. So, Mike, are you going to introduce this to us?
Thanks, Mayor, City Council. So, kind of bring you up to date of where we've been with this so far. Is after the incident happened, we have formulated a staff. The staff consisted of Brant Hanson, City Manager, Kevin Campbell, City Engineer, Mark Marchant, Street Supervisor, Paul Childs, Police Chief, and myself, Public Works Director. So once we realized that there was a problem there, we went in and consulted together as a group, coming up with the measure of how we wanted to move forward with this. Kevin recommended that we consult with the wall consultant group and have them come out and do a study so that we're having a biased opinion, so to speak, so that we're making sure that we're heading down the road where we're not just looking at one-sided. So Jeremy came out and we met as a group and we talked about different ideas and that, which he took back and brought back the proposal of what he had. So kind of the way that I'd like to do this, if it's okay with you guys, is to have Jeremy come up go through the traffic study, answer any questions that you may have that would be important. Remembering that we have Kevin and myself and Mark here that can answer questions on that as well. It's not something that we take lightly. I think, looking at the time and dates, I think we've moved pretty fast on this issue, but we don't want to overlook anything either. So what I'd like to do is turn the time over to Jeremy and then Kevin, and then I want to drop back to what our staff recommendation is. So we'll go to that point if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Mike. My name is Jeremy Searle. I'm with Wall Consultant Group, or WCG. Excited to be here with you to talk about this. As Mike mentioned, we did start with the site visit and look at different things and talk about some of the crashes that have occurred there and what possible mitigation measures might be utilized there. And then we went back and did our analysis. To summarize the crashes in the last 10 years, there have been 3 crashes here that have all had similar traits where they ran through the intersection and into the properties on the north side. And then looking back into the 90s, there's been up to 8, and then heard tonight maybe even 10 when going back into the 80s. So there's definitely a pattern here of this happening. With that in mind, we looked at several different options to mitigate these types of crashes. One of the first that we discussed there was signage. There are some signs out there. In the past, there have been a sign there that says there's a IC intersection ahead and a stop ahead, but those could definitely be improved. We recommend stop ahead signs on both sides of the road with the bigger sign requirements, along with the new retro reflectivity requirements to get drivers' attention. You could also do flashers on those to attract attention. Additionally, on the far side of the intersection, there's the double arrow. Right now, it's pretty small and off-centered, making it a little difficult to see for drivers. That could be replaced with a larger sign centered on the intersection so that people can respond to that better. Striping is another mitigation measure that we discussed. Mark has done a great job. He's already gone out and put a stop bar there since we had our site visit, so that's awesome. Additional striping that you could do is to add a crosswalk for that crossing there, as well as potentially a stop ahead pavement message could be considered. Some other options, and I'm going to go through several here. It's not to say that you have to do all of them, but we wanted to be thorough in our analysis of different options that you could consider here. One is high friction surface treatment. This is a pavement overlay that provides additional friction for people to stop. This helps on icy intersections or where there's a lot of curves. I know it's been used in canyons quite a bit.
Durability of those for our public works staff and plows, like how long will that treatment last?
Yeah, great question. Roughly 8 to 10 years or so, they'd have to be replaced. We do recommend that you get a quality contractor to put them in. This is kind of a newer treatment, and UDOT brought in some out-of-state ones that did a really good job and put it in, and it's lasted well. They've also had some others do it where it hasn't lasted so well, and I think that was the first time these contractors had done it. And so you want to get a good, experienced contractor on these to install that. Good question. Some additional things to consider. A raised crosswalk on the south side of the intersection. These are where the crosswalk is raised up to the height of the curb, and so a pedestrian doesn't have to drop down to the asphalt. He would stay at the same level as the sidewalk to cross the road. This requires vehicles to kind of go up and over, and creates a physical reminder that, hey, I need to stop. There's potentially pedestrians here, there's an intersection here, and provides that reminder and physical.
Kind of like a speed hump concept?
Yeah, we're never as traffic engineers, we're never in favor of speed bumps, right? Those types of things.
I said speed hump.
Speed hump is different, right? And you're right about that. So these would be wider, right? 10 foot wide for a crosswalk, and then your slopes on either side. So yeah. All right. Some additional options. The speed limit here is 30. The closest sign is down at 5th North. So it's a ways away. So one option here to, again, remind drivers to slow down and be cognizant of where they are is another speed limit sign, potentially with a driver feedback sign. And I know you've seen those before where they tell you your speed and it flashes at you if you're going too fast type thing. Another option that we included in here was transverse rumble strips. Those are across the road, so as you're approaching that stop sign, your tires would rumble to warn you that you're coming to a stop. I don't really recommend those. They are an option, and they're used often in kind of rural areas to remind people of stops. But in a residential area like this, the neighbors are not going to like that because they're going to hear this all the time, right? And nobody wants that. So, but it is an option. But I don't recommend that. Some drainage improvements. The city actually did do some drainage improvements a few years ago, and that has really helped improve the icy conditions out there. In the past, that water is kind of sheet flowed across the intersection, and when that froze, that caused some real ice that caused cars to slide through the intersection. That has been improved with a new storm drain box and some new curb and gutter there. But some additional improvements could also be considered to look at that. Clear zone improvements. Objects in the clear zone or near the edge of the roadway could be removed or relocated. What we found is that there's at least 2 of the cars crashes that have hit the utility pole across the street. So those could be moved. As we looked at that on site, that would be pretty difficult. The power lines go in both directions. Sometimes you can move power lines down the line, but when it's in both directions, that's pretty tough to do. So I don't know that that's super feasible in this location. Unless you buried the lines or something, which is pretty costly. One thing in there, looks like you've got the report on the screen, but if you go down to the next figure, the sight distance looking to the east is not great and doesn't meet standard. You'll see that there's some trees and fence and different things there that make it pretty hard when you're looking that direction to see. Cars are forced to pull out pretty far to make that, make sure they can judge that turn. And that's what's happening. So we have a stop bar out there. The hope is that cars will stop there, and then they have to kind of inch forward until they can see far enough down the road. So one consideration here could be to improve the sight distance and allow people to see to the east more easily. Curb extensions.
I'm not understanding that.
Okay. You're right. Sorry. You're right. I'm getting nervous standing up here. No, it's to the west. Yeah. So
You've got the same kind of a situation to the east.
to the east, you can see it kind of goes up the hill, and there's not trees there.
No, there's no trees. It's just the lay of the land.
Yeah, but you can see cars coming down the hill a lot further away than you can to the west, and I apologize for the confusion on the direction.
So I'm going to ask a more fundamental question.
Yeah.
Based on everything that's in the report, of the accidents listed, which would have been prevented by having these things in there?
Yeah, great question. On some of these where there's data on that, we tried to provide information on how much this reduces crashes. So for instance, the signage treatment that we talked about at the beginning, that reduces crashes by roughly 10 to 15%. So if we're talking 10 crashes since the 80s, that would reduce approximately 1, maybe 2 of those. So that's just the signing, right? And then if you do multiple treatments, that helps to reduce more of those.
Do you have, to George's point, do you have those percentages as well?
On the ones that we have data for, that there have been studies, we've included those.
Are those the UDOT attachments? When you talk.
So yeah, some of those provide information there, right? So like the driver feedback sign that has data on, it reduces crashes by 5% and reduces speeds by, I believe, between 2 and 10 miles per hour.
And to George's point, I'm not snickering at George, I'm kind of chuckling.
No.
I'm chuckling because
I was
one of the
waiting for you.
questions,
Yeah.
one of the questions that I have for you as a consultant to us is there's potential suggested ideas. So my question to you as a professional consultant to us would be, you're saying, okay, I don't recommend rumble strips. So what do you recommend, and do you have a priority recommendation as a professional consultant? I think you've given us a lot of ideas, but placing those in order of priority would even be more helpful for us as a council.
Okay, yeah, great question. So at a minimum, I would say the signing and striping should be done. Those are relatively low cost and provide a lot of attention to the intersection for drivers.
But in the same vein, signing and striping will not stop illegal activity in a vehicle, right?
Correct.
So we're recognizing that this is to potentially deal with weather conditions and help people be more aware of their driving.
Correct, and so that's where you start to get to the more physical improvements, right? So, for example, the next one is these curb extensions, and there was already a great explanation of that earlier, but that does provide more of a physical protection for the property, right? If we extend that park strip on the north side as well as curb extensions on the south side of the road for the pedestrians, that provides more of a physical barrier there. It is more expensive. But it's a great option. It does slow traffic. It does provide more awareness for pedestrians. It provides a physical barrier for the property. So it's a great option, and I recommend it. But you have to also consider the cost to the city and if it's worth it to the city to make those changes.
What's the distance between, at least staff's recommendation follows a little bit of your recommendations?
Okay.
What's the distance between each one of these signs? So they have the radar sign, and then the flashing stop sign ahead sign, and then the flashing actual stop sign. What's the appropriate distance between each of those signs?
Yeah.
You have to give a driver time enough to process that as it comes along. What's the right distance?
Yeah, that depends on the speed of the roadway. So at 30 miles an hour, I don't remember the exact distance, but it's a couple hundred feet.
Okay.
So it gives people time to react. And
Couple hundred feet between each sign.
Right.
So stop sign, then 200 feet before upcoming stop sign,
And then
200 feet before
So
that speed limit.
Your first sign is going to be
Correct.
400
Okay.
or so feet away based on that.
You gotta come up, if you're gonna
Sorry,
come up to the mic
Yeah.
so the public hears it too.
I believe the distance is 100 feet for every 10 mile an hour, so it would be 300 feet to the first advanced warning so you'd have your stop, and then you'd have the stop ahead 300 feet back from that.
Okay.
And then we would place the digital speed sign even further back than that.
So depending on how you two reconcile your distance at 400 to 600 feet between the first and, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I would defer to him on that one because I haven't looked at the standard
Okay.
recently, so. Perfect. Okay, a few other thoughts. There's been some talk about barriers. We don't recommend those cast-in-place jersey barriers, or the jersey barriers there, because, and I understand that there were some there in the past, but what that does is it provides a dangerous blunt end for people coming down the hill. If they hit that can be very dangerous for them. And so instead of doing something like that, if you wanted to go a barrier route, there is a landscaping wall on the property, not in the city property, but in the individual's property, that could be replaced and recast with a reinforced concrete retaining wall there to provide that barrier protection.
How do you feel about the neighbor's idea of having the barrier within a curb extension that kind of wraps around so you wouldn't have a blunt end?
So if you did the curb extension, I would go probably the landscaping route with boulders.
Okay, so you're looking I mean, I know this is the
Yeah,
homeowner's
yeah.
picture, but
But I was saying
you're
wrap-
saying, say that one more time?
He's saying put boulders within the barrier. They had a barrier come up here. I was saying wrap the barrier around if you did a guardrail barrier.
Yeah. So to follow standard, you have to have like a crash cushion or something like that, really, when it's out like that. So I don't know that I would do a full Jersey type barrier like
I'm
that.
not saying, define Jersey barrier. Are you talking about the concrete one?
Those concrete ones
Yeah,
like
I'm
you
not
see on the
talking about
highway.
concrete one. I'm talking about more the metal guardrail barrier.
Oh, yeah, you could do guardrail.
Because you wouldn't have to blend in if you wrapped it around.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the standards on that as well, but I think you have to have a pretty good distance off the roadway to wrap that back. It's not just like 5 feet.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I didn't know what kind of radius, and then
Yeah.
that Kevin or Mark may know.
Yeah.
The required radius in terms of the street standards.
Yeah, typically those that you see along the side of the highway, there's some on Legacy that have 3 or 4 cables, or there's the older looking ones that, under the Legacy Bridge. So those are typically designed for a glancing blow parallel with traffic, right? So they're not designed for a head-on.
Correct. That's why I was wondering if you had an angle.
Well, and also, but also within, we have to have a 12-foot clear zone. So we should be, again, back to the report of anything that's in that clear zone, we should actually be looking to remove, not add additional barriers in the 12-foot clear zone. So really, it ought to be, in my opinion, it ought to be back at least 12 feet. And even then, it ought to be designed so that it does have a crash cushion. It's not something that even a drunk driver runs into. And I don't know. That's something that ought to be designed so that it takes a head-on crash. If it's in the city right-of-way, in my opinion. Now, if it's on private property, okay, that's protection of private property. The city's not liable. But if it's in our right-of-way, we have to meet certain UDOT, MUTCD, and different standards. We can't just put a barrier in there that's not designed for a head-on collision, or, again, we're liable.
And I can see if you're coming westbound down Chase Lane and slip icy, snowy conditions, and you start to slide, you may, in its current state, slide, your tires hit the curb, and you keep on sliding. In this case, you may hit it, and then depending on the angle off of Chase as it currently stands, you'd have to angle that so the car would glance at, not head into it, I guess. Is that essentially what you're getting at?
I don't like the idea of a barrier in the city right-of-way because it's not going to be designed for a head-on collision. And that's the way that those people are entering that right-of-way, or
That's how they travel.
Exactly. So that's how the accidents are occurring. One note is we have improved the drainage. A couple of years ago, we put an inlet.
Could you define a couple years ago, because there's a 2018, you're talking post-2018 drainage improvement or prior to?
That would be, I would have to look it up for sure, but it was after 2018, I believe. Maybe it was after 2018. Correct.
So we
That
haven't
was
had
an
any,
improvement
we
that was
haven't had any
made.
slick road ones since then. We haven't had any slick road accidents there since we did.
We
did the
feel that
drainage.
it is made it so that the road is not icy. The Zollingers seem to
It's
concur that
significantly
it
better.
has made it so that what happened before is the water would come to the low point in the road and it would sheet drain across 400 East because it's a street that
Yeah.
just slopes from east to west. Well, this inlet was placed in a low spot to where it picks up that water before it can sheet flow and ice up. So we've kind of come to the concurrence that we think that the icy road issue has been
Taken care of.
taken care of.
That's what I would think with it, no more accidents since then.
I travel that intersection 2 or 3 times a day. It is better, but it's not fixed. The problem is, or the elephant in the room is, it's the people who don't care about any traffic rules and are going so fast that the road can't contain it and handle it. I've spun out in the intersection. I've hit the curb. I've never gone over the curb. And that's what happens to most. So, yes, it's better. There's no question that it's better, but it still gets icy. People still slide over and hit the curb and then curse because they ruin the alignment on the front end of the car. But that's the people who are traveling at 20 to 35 miles an hour within the realm of the speed limit. The difficulty that we're talking about is the people that are going 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and nothing short of a barrier is going to stop it. Now, I'm not an engineer, and I understand that, but I've lived there for 30 plus years. I've watched the people with the accidents and the difficulties. I've experienced them myself, but I wasn't going 50 miles an hour. I was going 30 miles an hour when that was too fast. And on ice, that can be too fast. So,
And Bill, you're kind of going to the same issue I was. Of the 3 accidents listed, nothing that I've heard tonight would have prevented 2 of them, for sure. And then the other one, it's always arguable. I've been in Texas during ice storms where 2 miles an hour is too fast, right? So some of it does come down to a driver responsibility of how they're operating their vehicle. And on some of these, 2019, 2022, those crashes, I don't see any of these measures preventing that type of activity.
that's right. So that's my feeling. I think the only thing that solves it is something that it is a barrier.
So if it's a barrier, it can't be in the clear zone, it has to be on owner's property? Is that kind of what?
That would be my recommendation. Not in the park strip, that would put the city at risk and liability if someone.
You're saying that's within our right of way?
That's within our clear zone, within our right of way, and it would not be designed to take on even a 45-degree angle below. Again, unless there was a crash cushion that's fairly long and large, there's just not the space to do that. But, to have additional clear zone, usually the bump outs or the curb extensions that we've been talking about, usually those are designed to slow down traffic in the direction that you're traveling. They're not typically designed to increase your clear zone, right? So usually you'd have, if you're trying to slow traffic down northbound on 400 East, you'd have the bump outs on the corners of 400 East. That's what the curb extensions are designed for, traffic calming.
For the record, as a consultant, you're nodding, but that doesn't translate to public record. You seem to be agreeing. Are you agreeing with what Kevin is saying?
Yeah, I mean, that they are commonly used for that, absolutely. So, in this case, they'd serve multiple purposes, right? Traffic calming, that is most commonly what they're used for. It shortens that pedestrian crossing distance. And then if you did it on the opposite side, it does, like you said, increase the clear zone. That's typically not what they're designed for, but it would serve that purpose in this case.
So what do you think, how do you feel about adding speed humps along 400 West in conjunction with signs? So for example, you have a similar concept up on 12th Avenue in Salt Lake City, or you have one down past, what would it be, like 23rd Southish between 23rd East and 19th East. You have some of those areas. That's kind of that physical reminder. We don't want a speed bump, and I've talked to our public works department because speed bumps are a disaster for snow removal and ruin plow equipment, but is there a speed hump that if, in addition to some signage, if you're doing a speed hump along 400 East, there's a physical, I just hit a speed hump, I'm going way too fast.
Or would a bus be able to navigate that?
Well, they're not that tall, so I can't imagine why not, but.
Yeah, buses can handle that. recommend them just kind of down the street like that, typically, especially here. It is posted at 30. In most conditions, it's appropriate to drive 30. Typically, we want them at a key location where we really want to attract attention. And usually that's for pedestrians, which is why we like the raised crosswalks, right? So in this case, we could do one here.
I'm just saying, I think a raised crosswalk's too late.
Too
So
late.
I'm trying to think.
That's
can
what
you
I'm
get-
worried about
can you-
too with the raised
Because
crosswalk.
4/4 east is, you're coming, and then all of a sudden you've got that, the grade starts to change, you're coming down. So I'm wondering if you put the speed hump as the grade starts to shift from uphill or flat to downhill more, that's the appropriate location for a speed hump as that place marker for a driver who may be going 50, or are you gonna stop somebody from breaking the law? But is there something additional in place that could help out, that maybe would be satisfactory to Public Works in terms of not damaging our Public Works equipment, because that's an important piece of the puzzle, but also safety generally in that intersection, as well as, my personal feeling is, let's move the speed limit down from 30 to 25 through there, just that last segment. So that last, I don't know what your thought is, that last speed limit sign isn't 30 anymore, it's 25.
Why not change the speed limit to 25 starting at Parish Lane?
And I don't disagree with that either, frankly.
To that point,
Don't drive it.
Right. I was going to say, you'd have a lot
I
of.
do drive it. I mean, I'm on that road several
I'm driving
times.
down by 400 West, so I can have a long discussion about that.
I do drive it. and-
Yeah, I thank you.
But again, that doesn't necessarily stop illegal driving activity.
So I was going to say, though, we are talking about putting a flashing stop sign. We are talking about putting signs. So to me, the accidents that have happened were people that were breaking the law. But if you have lighted signs and if you have signs down the road, I think what we're looking at is going to help the act. We say, well, that won't stop it. Well, it's not going to stop somebody that's going to speed no matter what. But I do think a normal person may be speeding, but you've got the signs, you've got 3 new signs up, you've got a flashing stop sign up. That is going to make a difference.
I just know that we all slow down instinctively when we hit a speed bump or a speed hump.
We do, but I still think that's going to be.
So I don't think you've answered my question.
Yeah,
We got signs.
to be totally honest, I'm not a big fan of that. It's certainly an option that the
For
city
what
can consider.
reasons? Help us understand why.
Yeah,
Because I am, so.
yeah, and that's fine, right? I'm not saying
But
the
I
city
may
can't
change
do
my
that.
mind after you explain it in your professional opinion.
So, again, we usually use those when you're trying to attract attention to a specific thing, so like at a raised crosswalk where there's pedestrians. Other locations, people tend to, once they get past them, they just speed back up again. And there's been studies specifically for stop signs that are used for this purpose where they're put, but raised, a speed hump would fall into that same category where people feel like they're being slowed down on purpose, and so to make up the time, they actually speed up after they go past it.
Except that I'm hoping the distance to that sign plus the flasher signs will be the indication, oh, I've got to stop anyway. It's not like I've got free reign and I'm past the school zone, so I'm going to make up time. I'm sure Robin sees that all the time. Whereas in this case, you don't have a long distance to a stop sign.
Robin's waving a sign with kids in a crosswalk, and they still go through it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Let me mention before I forget, so Chase Lane is 25 miles per hour and it's a wider road. Parish Lane is also 25 miles per hour.
So it makes sense.
So
400 East 25.
I mean, I'm not advocating it, I'm just pointing out that Parish Lane and Chase Lane are both 25 miles per hour.
Can I ask Mark to give your Public Works, or Mike, your Public Works opinion on a speed hump 300 feet out from the intersection, please?
You're not going to like it, I can tell.
He doesn't want to answer that.
It doesn't matter if I like it or not. He's the guy on the ground, and so I think that's important for us to hear
is.
The
from our
biggest,
street supervisor.
the biggest thing is going to be snow plowing. We just have to see how big the hump was, I guess, in order to see how it would work with the plow. I know as you would
What's
come.
the angle of approach for the plow, right? That's what
Yeah.
you're concerned about?
So speed bump generally has got a 60-degree angle as it goes
Yeah,
up,
they're fairly
right?
sharp, yeah.
Right, it's a
So
sharp
when you talk about a raised crosswalk, how long, so let's say it's raised 4 inches or 3 inches, how long is the raise? In other words, is it a 12-inch, is it a 16-inch? Is your
Usually they're
angle?
4 feet long,
Yeah.
wide.
Yeah,
They're
usually-
pretty
That's how wide they are, but
And then
what's-
your angle is probably a 30-degree approach.
Yeah, it's usually several feet to raise up to that.
Yeah.
It's not like 6 inches.
And that's
It
in my
just
mind,
kind of
that's my
gives, so if
mind,
you hit
because-
it fast, it's more like a, oh, I just hit
Forget
this.
a launch
But the
somebody
the
that's
question
doing
to Mark
50
is,
miles
what
an
does that
hour.
do to the equipment? If it goes up 4 inches over 2 feet, can the equipment handle that?
4
feet would be
inches.
too short, it'd probably be 3 feet or so, Mark.
Yeah, and 4 inches, I guess the only thing you would have is the truck come up and the front tires come up onto the hump. You're gonna have a place where the snowplow might come off the
Yeah,
ground,
so you're gonna leave
leaving a
snow
slick
behind.
spot in between the back of the hump and where the plow touches again. So you're not necessarily eliminating the
Because you're gonna-
slick
by
problem in
virtue
the
of the
winter.
truck going up over, you're lifting.
And you're gonna have that
Unless you
both
have some little
sides.
play in the plow, though. a little
And there
bit.
is a little play, but if
Don't
you
know,
got
about
way
4
too,
inches? Yeah.
yeah, probably 4 inches.
Okay. Well,
So if it
maybe
was
it
too
works.
high, you're gonna have a longer,
Misjudge it and you're gonna have a sudden stop, right?
yes.
Yeah.
How
When you
tall
say-
are our curbs? What's our spec, in our,
The
Top
curb
out.
is 6 inches tall.
so you have,
So-
your raised crosswalk's got to, or raised crosswalk would be.
My
raised
concern
crosswalk.
is when you start putting speed bumps in the city right-of-way, speed humps, where does it stop? So the report did not recommend speed humps.
It didn't.
It
talk about it.
no, it
Yeah.
didn't recommend them at all.
Okay.
It recommended a raised crosswalk. That's something, if you drive through the Viewmont parking lot, you'll see those. They connect the gym to the football field that you can walk along. So it's a gradual speed, crosswalk that's raised that you can gradually come up and down. But even those, as far as maintenance in our city streets, speed bumps or humps is also a maintenance issue whenever we overlay. So introducing that into the city standards, it's not just, oh, we want it in one spot. Well, now every other street's going to want a speed hump. I mean, that's, from my point of view, is what I just wouldn't recommend going down that. And the
But
report,
what other streets do we have in our city that have this issue?
well, we have a lot of streets where we have,
There's gonna be a lot more that pop up.
we have a lot of streets where people
what you're saying,
complain.
You'll have people that want one between Main and 400 West on Chase. You'll have one that want them on Porter Lane.
We just had a complaint last week on 1350 North between 2nd and 4th West. So anyways, yeah, that's,
You're concerned that, hey, Spencer, you're opening a can of worms.
But I
I
think,
wouldn't recommend that we start putting those in the city right of way. I do think it is opening.
But one of the recommendations was to have it at the, like,
A
what's the
raised
difference?
crosswalk.
What's the difference between a raised crosswalk and a speed hump, though? In terms of maintenance and plowing, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I don't think we would recommend either as city staff.
But he recommended it.
Yeah,
so-
he's looking at all options that might be viable. Then city staff had their recommendations. So it is two separate. We've had a third party come in with,
You're filtering his recommendations down to our personal, or our city level.
yeah, and I do want to mention that Mrs. Solinger mentioned that we had a hard copy of the report, but we hadn't released the report out to the public yet. And so I didn't want them to feel like when we met on site, we weren't trying to, yeah, I know you didn't. I just wanted to make sure you knew that, city staff had read the report. When we met on site, we didn't talk a lot about options that cost more. We talked a lot about options that were less expensive, signing, striping, the flashing lights. We didn't get into a lot of discussion on the curb extensions or the mini roundabout or the larger roundabout. But anyways, that's just to,
Thanks.
yeah.
And another thing,
say, I think, I wanted to make the opinion, the statement that I like that we're looking at these ideas and brainstorming, but the reality is, would a speed hump stop a 60-mile-an-hour car? I mean, we can,
not gonna stop
we
it,
could,
but I think
we
there's a
could
physical
throw
jolt that
money at this
lands
all day
on
long,
too
and we
far.
still may have a car go through. I mean, some of the options that were suggested, the raised crosswalk, they're not necessarily made to slow a car down, they're made to protect a pedestrian, correct?
Correct.
Jeremy?
Both,
I mean, I'm
right?
asking you.
I mean, both, right? They're primarily used for pedestrians, right? But they do provide that physical reminder to the driver that they need to either stop or slow.
And if the car is going faster than the speed limit or the raised crosswalk, in my opinion, becomes a hazard for the driver as well. So if they're moving fast and they get that jolt, they can lose control of the vehicle.
Not at 25 miles an hour.
They're not driving 25 miles an hour.
It's the ones that are driving 60 miles an hour.
Where I'm at on this is that for me, I don't want to do feel goods. If we believe that it can actually have a positive impact, let's do it.
I feel like it could have a positive impact. It's,
You still got a very small hill to climb.
well, it's too far, it sounds
Right.
like, with our staff.
Is there, so talking
I mean,
about,
I don't begrudge them for it. I mean, I just wanted to vet the idea completely, and I think we vetted it completely.
And I think we also need to realize that there are a lot of these areas around the city. This is not isolated. You've got the top of Parish Lane that you just had a car go right through a house into a bedroom.
Right.
And they've had several cars into their,
Have they really? Several?
into their yard. And it's been several accidents where the yard is. When I was crossing up there, there was more than once that I could see what was going to happen, and I took running up off the road thinking, I don't know where these
I don't
cars are
wanna
going to
meet 'em.
land, but I don't want to be underneath them. And so, yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of these, like I said, they just went, and I know that when they moved into that house, they were said, don't put up a fence here because you've got somebody that would go through and take your fence down probably 4 or 5 times a year. And now they've had one that's came clear through the side of the house into the bedroom. So it isn't an isolated thing, but I do think the flashing lights, the signs, I think that's going to be the best thing to try to slow down somebody that's not following.
can I ask one more question? I might be wrong on this, but when we're talking about, you mentioned on the curb extensions, a potential barrier. You're talking on the property owner's land?
Yeah, when we talk about barrier, we talk about it on the property owner's land. That's why
So
we talk
on
about
the other
replacing that
side
landscape.
Of the sidewalk. So
Right.
you two are in agreement, clear zone free, the barriers have to be
Right.
on the property owner's
Right.
property.
What about the discussion that's out there about the rocks in the park strip?
No, we can't
That's
do
not
that.
on.
You have to have a clear zone.
I
They're
can
saying
answer
we
that,
can't
because
put
we
rocks
talked
in
about
the
that in the
park
field
strip.
meeting. So the city ordinance does allow 2-foot boulders that can be exposed 2 feet, so maybe they're 3-foot boulders that are buried 1 foot. Those can be placed in the park strip, in the clear zone. They're not going to kill somebody if they hit it head on. It's going to slow them down. So that was something that was discussed, is that 3-foot boulders buried 1 foot in the park strip would be allowed, and Mark, he can speak to that some more, but he felt comfortable with that at the field
A
meeting.
raised median there? Like a raised median, I guess we don't want to do that, because that's going to be in a park strip, that'd be a disaster.
Yeah, landscape rocks, I think, would be
Yeah.
much less liability. And then larger boulders, maybe at the back of sidewalk, was an idea that was discussed a little bit at the site meeting.
Did you finish your presentation, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I think we're done.
On every which way and roundabout.
Can I just
No
ask you
pun
one more
intended.
question? So when you talk about maybe rocks in the park strip, do you need that curb extension, or can you fit it in the existing?
They're pretty narrow, those park strips. They're only, what, 2 feet?
They are pretty narrow, that's why I'm
3
asking.
foot,
I don't.
I think that 3 foot is our standard.
So I don't know that,
They're little, like it's narrow.
yeah, it's pretty narrow. It barely fits the power pole that's in there.
That's the
These
standard,
were-
but this place is really narrow.
Oh, that's our standard, and this is even.
That might not be, it may not be clear.
Yeah,
This is really narrow.
so it's really narrow. So realistically, to fit anything in there, you'd probably have to extend that out a little bit. So,
Okay.
I guess to sum up we did look at a lot of different options here because we wanted to be thorough in the different things and provide you options for the city to look at. Someone mentioned the roundabout and things. Those are long-term plans if you wanted to put in your transportation master plan or something to change in the future.
Could you end up condemning property to put a roundabout?
For a full roundabout, you would, yeah. For a mini roundabout, you wouldn't have to, but those are still kind of long-term master planning things, not necessarily a short-term, let's fix this problem right now.
And in my mind, at least, personally, I hate roundabouts, but in my mind, our big problem is the people who are going fast and not following rules. Roundabouts not really going to fix it. Is it?
Well, I want him to answer that, because in my mind, I kind of am doubtful about that mini one, but.
Yeah, I'll speak to larger roundabouts first. So larger roundabouts actually do reduce crashes significantly, quite a bit compared to both stop signs and signals. They have far fewer crashes and their severity is far fewer. In this case, people running clear through, they would hit that center island of the roundabout rather than the property. So there would still, if they were completely disregarding the law and just blowing straight through, there would still be a crash, right? But they'd hit that center island rather than the property on the opposite side.
So what's that going to do? It's going to launch the car in the air, go straight through the intersection and end up going through the fence anyway.
It depends how you design the roundabout and what's in the middle, right? So it could either stop it there, or if they're going fast enough, I guess they could blow all the way through. But that's, like I said, a long-term, 20 plus years out to master plan that and pay for it. So that was, anyway, just.
Jeremy, I thought I'd beat this horse dead, and now I'm not, because I'm pulling up a study that the U of U did with, the Salt Lake City transportation and others. And this study in particular denotes that the 12-foot humps, not bumps, have the highest average change in speed for a traffic calming measure as it relates to mini roundabouts, narrowings, diverters, etc.
But I think what they're saying is that would have to be back down the road further. It wouldn't do any good to slow them right when they hit the stop sign.
I agree. I don't
That's
want
what
it at
he's
the
saying.
stop sign.
He
I want it
wants it
300 feet
further.
back or 600 feet back at your first flasher. Or your second flasher, depending on where we put it.
It's certainly an option. I know, I think it does open kind of a can of worms, if you will, everyone wanting them. I know there's concerns with maintenance.
Yeah.
It's certainly an option.
And I don't discount those at all. I mean, so I know what it's like. Well, I don't know specifically what it's like, but I'm in the infrastructure business on occasion, so I'm very attuned to that concern and totally understand it. So I'm trying to balance community safety with community maintenance and administration. That's what we're all trying to do, I think.
Okay. Unless there's any other questions on that.
Let's get Mike up here. Mike, you are going to include everybody. Maybe they've all been included now. Was there anything else you would need?
I think we're pretty well there, unless you guys have anything else.
I just wanted to speak to landscape boulders in the park strip. At my home, I actually use landscape boulders as a barrier out in front of my home. I live on a slight curve and the road breaks to the west. So I've got a flower planter across probably 100 foot of my frontage where that road breaks, where I've placed landscape boulders, and they're very effective. They work very well. We catch a car, 2, 3 a year through there, so they are very effective.
Are they on your property or in the
They're
park?
on my property.
On your own property?
Yes.
Not in the park strip.
No, I don't have a park strip,
Okay.
but they're far enough back that they're out of the right of way and on my
Are
property.
is it the same type of thing where it's a head-on, a T intersection and?
No,
I
it's in a,
mean, it doesn't
it's
need to
in
be
a
T,
curve.
but, okay.
It's in a curve and then the road breaks. The crown of the road breaks really hard to the west, so it will drain.
Okay.
There's probably three things that I would like to bring up before I jump into what the staff recommendation is number one is the signs as you come onto them, they're not lit up until you hit a certain footage. Then the lights come on. Go to the next one, then the lights come on, so forth all the way down. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It is in the dark, it is something that wakes you up a little bit. I was up in Island Park and had a similar instance there to where as I got coming through, the lights come on and they were pretty brilliant, you know, and so that is something you need to understand as you're making a decision. It's not just a lit sign that stays lit all the time. It's one that goes out after the cars are passed and that. So second thing is, and I'm not against whatever we want to do, but a roundabout, Kaysville just bid one out. It's $1.6 million. They own two sides of the roundabout. So who knows if citizens would have had the other side. And I know that we're not kind of heading down that road at this time, but that just gives you a number. The third thing is probably from a former snowplow operator that ran that road for 38 years. You know, that hill's tricky, you know, and so I don't care if we look at, you know, the extended curb, that kind of stuff, but I think we have to sit back and ask ourselves, is it safe for our operators? If he's coming down the hill, I used to plow it with a bobtail. Now they plow it with a 10-wheeler and a wing. So you got a lot more weight, a lot more stuff coming down the road. I'm not against it, but I want to make sure that our staff feels good about what we would want to do there if we did the extended curb. And I've kind of changed a little bit of my staff recommendation. And so I'd move forward. I think you guys kind of understand as the first coming from the south heading north would be the stop or the the speed limit sign, which we could move and take it to other places that might be hot areas that need to be taken care of. So when we're spending the money on that, we're not just spending it for one location, we're spending it for multiple. The police chief was, you know, agreed with that. And so that would be something we could move. The next one would be the stop ahead sign. And these are all 36 by 36. The speed limit sign is not that, I don't believe. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. The stop sign is 36 by 36 LED. We've already put the stop bar in there. If we need to go back and put a crosswalk in there, we're not against doing that. That's something that we could do. And then you move into the next one, which is the double arrow, which is 24 inches high, 48 inches wide, and the lit as well. So these images I put in there are not the actual signs that we're looking at. It's just to kind of give you an opinion what's going on. The optional signage that, you know, to that point where we estimate we're about $15,000 at that point. With the study, we're pushing over $20,000 that we spent on this. And like, you know, safety for people is more important than money, I agree. The optional sign that we could put in there would be the flashing icy road ahead sign, which would work the same way.
Mike, on that one, where would you want that? So if we're doing them every 300 feet, like Mark said, if we're already at the stop sign at the intersection, and then we're back to the flashing stop sign ahead, and then we're to the radar sign.
I'm not sure where would we put that, Mark?
So at this point, the icy intersection signs are between the stop ahead and the stop.
Okay, so it's like 150 back from the actual intersection?
From the actual intersection, it'd probably be 200-ish.
Okay, so you put about 100 feet after the stop sign ahead flasher.
Yeah, it's actually on a existing pole is how it was, as what it's on now. So we could adjust that to make it comply with the current standard.
And that one wouldn't be used very often because we don't have slick roads very often anymore.
So the way the sign's set up,
No, we won't do those this winter.
Seasonally, turn it on at end of October and you turn it off?
Well, it would only come on, I think, when there was a snowstorm.
it actually has sensors, it has sensors that detect icy conditions, and so it would only flash. That's why it's so expensive, is because of the technology.
So I think our money would be better spent on the other signs. I think this one for the little bit of time, and no accidents have happened there from icy roads since we did fix the.
That's kind of why that got listed as an optional signage. So, yeah. So the other thing is the high friction surface. We're offering that as an option. If city council would like to go that way, we would like to kind of try it to see if we like it. You know, if it didn't work, then we wouldn't put it back. But if we felt like it did work, it was worthwhile. That's something we would plan into our maintenance that is an optional deal. You can kind of see the estimate of what that would cost. That's something, if we decided to do it, we would wait till we have it bid out and we're able to do it cheap and we're able to get a good contractor and have it done right and be able to monitor it with the right temperatures of putting it down. Another option that staff had was a monetary contribution that the city would give that wouldn't tie us legally liable for anything, but we would maybe donate a little bit of money to that cause. I know that Brant reached out to a contractor to try to help get him some boulders. We're still not against that, but I can't guarantee that, so that's not something I can throw onto the table at this point. And probably the last, and this is just me, so my feeling is if none of this is, well, if we want to look further into it, we want to look at the curb extensions, I feel like our staff needs to have time to review that. I think that we need to have a cost estimate. I don't believe it's going to be very cheap at all. And then we also need to have our maintenance look at it and see if that would work. And so my feeling is if you want to go to the curb extension, I'd like to see us table it to where the staff has more time to prepare for that one. So that's kind of where I'm at. So questions, if you have some for me.
Can you get a hold of actual data on curb extensions and how they function in terms of like grass reduction?
We can dig into all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not an avenue that we pursued. At first, we felt like the signage would take care of it. We felt like we were heading down the right road. With the email that I got today, I'm kind of going, well, maybe we need to look at it. I'm not against looking at anything at this point to make sure that people's safety is at hand, but I would need more time to research that.
The expert said that they are really for slowing you going down that road. They're not really made for turning out. They're made for the road you're driving on, not one that you're turning onto. So I think it would be awfully expensive for the little bit that it would do us, because it's not going to slow them down. That's not what the curb extension is used for. It would be if we had people running down Chase Lane and then going in, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't think the curb extension is
We're trying to resolve an east-west traffic issue, and now what happens to, or sorry, we're trying to go north-south.
right,
Sorry, thank you.
and that would be
We're trying-
more,
And now we're introducing a potential challenge on east-west traffic.
right.
Well, that would be part of my concern, coming down the hill if I'm in a plow, and I realize that's only a period of time, and now I'm veering out. My concern is if I lose control, am I coming across into the road? Normally we go up the hill, we get a lot of stalled out, maybe not a problem, but I think we need to have time to look into that as well. The other problem that I see is I think we need to run a bus model. Mark suggested that earlier today, that if we decide to go that route, we need to run some models and make sure that it'll work. None of us as staff want to go out and spend money and not resolve it. I mean, for them as well as us, we want to resolve the problem.
Well, and I don't know that we'll ever fully
I don't think you ever will, to be totally honest with
I
you.
think we're giving good faith effort to try and come
Well,
up with
to
the best
me,
solution
the
possible.
big boulders, I think, and that's just me speaking, if it was my lot, I'd want to have put 3 or 4 big boulders in there, chain link fence, vinyl going out the side, so if somebody's coming there, they see the boulders and they want to detour through it. But now you got to move on to the other person's property as well and have some boulders,
I
so.
think in terms of a good, since I'm using metaphors tonight, like 4th North and Bountiful is a similar type of a road going downhill. And you'll see in large storms that people start to slide, and because of the crowning in the road, they'll start to slide, they'll hit the curb, and they'll slide down the hill. And you don't see the curb extensions on 400 North, even despite that. So I think that's maybe a good, at first when I saw these drawings, I thought, oh, that might be a great idea. And then the more I think about it, I think it presents some serious challenges for east to west traffic. Not only just for our own plow operators, for our
Other
residents
cars.
as well. Yeah, because now you have, to Kevin's point, you introduce almost an obstruction here, and
Especially when
It's
they're
tough.
telling us that it's
tough.
not
There's no easy
fixing.
solution.
I think there's another thing that I kind of want Lisa to weigh in on. We did receive an email from the homeowner today. If this happens again, they're going to continue to file claims. If this doesn't solve the problem, I don't want to throw money at something that doesn't, and we just continue to have a problem. I mean, where are we at as far as
I think you're just
this?
trying to do I don't think you're ever gonna get, we'll never have an accident.
I don't,
here
I
again, right?
agree, but what is the city's responsibility as far as, the roads need to be safe? Is this road and intersection safe?
Yeah, and that's why we recommended that we hire an expert, a traffic engineer, to help us understand. I don't think the report says that it's a unsafe intersection. Has it been designed to code? And they've given us some really good options on making it safe. Cities are not the insurer of misuse of roads. We need to design and maintain reasonably safe roads, yes. But, they would have to establish, yes, this is, it's defective or negligent design or unsafe. And so that would be the question, and we could certainly go litigate that. But I think what the city needs to do is provide reasonable mechanisms to make this safer. We are not going to stop every person driving drunk going 60 miles an hour. But that occurs anywhere on a road. So I think we need reasonable mitigation.
I guess that's the question I'm asking, and I desperately want there to be this black and white solution that we can solve this problem for them, and there's never going to be a problem, but I'm not sure I'm seeing a black and white solution.
There's no
All you've
black
got
and
is a
white.
reasonable gray one.
Let me just, back to the curb extension on Chase Lane. I don't want to make it sound like that's not going to increase safety, because going from, say, we have maybe a 7-foot clear zone now, and increasing that to a 12-foot clear zone, does that increase safety a little bit? Sure. One thing you'd have to, to Mike's point of a cost estimate, you're not going to be able to taper that or transition that in a short amount of time. You're going to have to transition that, quite a ways up. That would need to be designed to the east
That's
quite a ways.
You're only gonna have until 300 east, right?
No, you could go through and align the next, you could even go through the intersection and start to veer people, but you're right, you're incurring more cost, so.
Well, I'm not, mine's more practicality than cost discussion.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying.
If cost isn't, you can transition that and taper it far enough up the road and far enough down the road to where, okay, now you're dealing with 38 feet of pavement instead of 43, and people, you'd have to design it for the bus traffic and make sure that that all fit. I just don't want you to feel like I'm against the curb extension. I just personally, and professionally, I should say more so, is that the thought of a barrier in that park strip and in the city right-of-way is what I don't want to try to go down that road, because we're not gonna be able to design that to a
And then our road
broader
is
city
not safe.
standard.
You're creating a condition that's not
Right.
safe within the right-of-way. And that's why I'm saying, I love the council being creative, but we did hire a traffic expert. I welcome you to pick any of those options that are in the report as recommended traffic safety options.
But we like to think we're traffic engineers.
I know, I love
I don't think I
Can
am
we call
one.
Jeremy real quick? Sure. Jeremy, what do you feel, how do you feel about Mark's additional suggestion to have the small boulders in the 2-foot park strip?
In the 2-foot park strip, I think you'll be hard pressed to fit them in there. But I'm not opposed to it. I mean, they'd be smaller boulders. I think you may be better off doing them on the property on the other side of the sidewalk.
So since we pulled you back up to the front here, and we talked about, you had mentioned that some of the safety features, you said one would reduce it by X percentage. Do you see this as a cumulative stacking effect, or is there diminishing returns? 1 sign, 3 signs, 2 signs? Seems to me that you've already warned the careful driver, the one who needs to know about the ice. We've already kind of established that it doesn't change the illegal behavior of others. Do you need all of them? Does one have the same effect as 2? Help us understand how that works.
Yeah, great question. Multiple treatments do raise more awareness. So I think having those multiple signs that was talked about is effective, and having those warnings as you approach.
Would you care to put a number on that? Like, is it 5% becomes 15% of crashes, becomes 20? Help me understand what the stacking effect is on what these add. I mean, I understand, yes, you're raising awareness, but that sounds anecdotal. What's the science behind that supports that?
Yeah, the studies just show the warning signs ahead reduce it by 10 to 15%.
So 3 warning signs reduces it by 15% times 3, or is it 15% 17?
I don't have that data.
Well, and I'm not trying to be flip, I'm really trying to establish this is like, if you put 6 signs, does that make it 6 times safer than 1?
No.
I don't think so either, and I'm not trying to be pedantic about it, but it's back to.
If you get 15% out of 1, you probably get 25% out of 2, and 30% out of 3.
Maybe, maybe not.
There's
It's
a
back to your.
point of diminishing return.
We're being creative again.
Well,
We don't know
yes,
the
but-
answers, and neither
but
does
that's
he.
what- But that's, I'm kind of reacting to your question about like, well, if we spend this money, what, how much value do you get out of it? I'm like, okay, well, where do you reach your diminishing returns? Is one super bright flashing sign that comes on when you get close enough of a jarring thing to get you there? Or, I mean, to me, I don't want to overdo it. I also want to make sure that we're providing enough.
Jeremy, can I ask you this question? If that were your house, what would you feel the safest about? Which treatment would, and I get the roundabout might be a great treatment, but that's not in the cards for like the next year or two.
Understood.
I'm gonna have to go out on a limb here that the Zollingers and the Higgs do not want to wait for us to master plan that in.
Yeah, understood.
And I don't think they want to lose their property either, maybe, so.
Yeah,
Say, to keep this to your professional opinion.
Okay.
okay. I think that the recommendations that Mike put forward are great, and that's what I would go with. And I think that's what I would stick with.
Can I make a summary for consideration and maybe action items for the council? Would that be okay?
As long as you put dollar amounts and give us a summary.
No, I won't be able to give you dollar amounts, but staff has helped us by giving us some dollar amounts. Can I make a suggestion that or a recommendation for the council? And I don't know if we're making this as a motion, because I don't know if there's a motion attached to it, but first, I think we should reduce the speed limit from Parish to 400, or to Chase Lane, to 25 miles an hour. It makes sense given the Parish Lane speed limit and the Chase Lane speed limit.
So before you go further on that, Lisa, point of clarification, is that within the city council purview, or is that only the public safety who can do
Yeah,
that?
it would have to be subject to recommendation in accordance with the state code. There are provisions on when and how you can reduce speed limits.
Okay, so
Would be
subject to state
compliance with state law.
public safety, thank you. Good clarification, George. And then along with that, we would post new mile per hour signs, but maybe add 1 or 2, whatever, again, based off of our city staff recommendation, that we install the speed limit driver feedback radar sign as recommended by staff, that we install the stop sign flashing ahead sign recommended by staff in the distance intervals that they've recommended, and that we install an actual stop sign flashing sign, as well as the flashing double arrow sign that they've recommended on the north side of the street. The 2 ones that I'm in favor for, that maybe council members may not be in favor for, would be, I like Mark's idea for some smaller landscape boulders, as best as we can fit them in there. Jeremy's saying maybe we'll see what we can fit in there. We'll do our best. And I'm still in favor of the speed hump. That would be my recommendation to the council.
My only comment would be on the landscape boulders, because our code requires the property owner to maintain the park strip. So I think we need to be cautious about what the city is putting in the park strip and who's maintaining that.
Thank you.
Whose liability is it?
Yeah. Do we give an allowance to a can we give an allowance to a homeowner to do something like that, where they install it and it's theirs?
I would go with Mike's comment, that
But
if you'd like to be creative, we'd prefer that you table that action or add it as an additional, but we would certainly have to.
The park staff recommendation was they were talking about, some compensation.
All that you mentioned, we need that to be priced out and that type of thing as well too.
I think we need to know, does that cause a liability issue for the city? I mean, I'm not trying to be.
Right, and is it a traffic code issue?
Are we
That's where I like everything.
Are we only talking about the rocks, or are we now talking about the general scope of the recommendation?
I'm just talking about your landscape boulders in the park.
Okay, thank you.
I was up to where you started, yeah.
Finish your thought, Lisa,
Yeah.
because we kind of cut you off. You were going to have one more thought. Please finish out his thought.
I can't remember.
Oh, shoot.
I was
It
up
was
to you
good.
right until you started putting obstructions. Anything that was a road safety warning thing, I was with you, right up to
Okay.
that point. After that, I think that crosses a line where we need a lot more information from staff to support
Yeah,
that.
to that point about the speed humps or bumps, we would need to come up with a city standard. That's not something that we have in our,
Because we don't have it in our,
exactly, so that's something we haven't ever recommended, so.
okay. So maybe that's a phase 2, if at all. That's Spencer's phase 2, but nobody else on the council.
I'm gonna have to politely disagree with you on that one, just
that's-
because it's
All
not a.
within, to
Yeah.
Lisa's point, all within the umbrella of a public safety code. I mean, I'm not requesting that the council consider anything outside the umbrella of public safety specifications, codes, guidelines. I'm saying we stay within that umbrella if at all possible.
So I could vote for the signs 100%. I could not vote for the speed limit reduction at this time. I think before we do that, we would need to have a public hearing from the neighbors, the people that drive that road all the time, the people that live on that road. I know that at one point in time, I think you were on the planning commission, Gina, we talked about lowering the speed limit on Main Street in Centerville, and it was going to reduce congestion, and it came out that it would actually increase it, and the people came out in droves. They did not want the speed limit to be reduced on Main Street.
Did we ever really get to decide on that? Doesn't UDOT set the speed
And
limit?
UDOT does set this.
That was never a decision that we had to
Right.
make.
I don't think that's a,
So
I
I'm
don't think
not,
that's a comparable example.
I'm not ready to reduce the speed limit. I'm not sure.
Base and Parish at 25? I mean, if they were at 30, that would be a different scenario for me. But where they're at 25, I think there's clear precedent.
Why not have vet it and see what happens in a public hearing?
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'd want to hear from the people before
And I'm
I
not
took
opposed to
that
that
step.
either. I just,
But I'm ready to, I don't want these people to have to wait for us to do all of
We
that.
don't have to, we
So
can.
I'd
we
be
can still
willing
move
to
forward
do
with
the
something.
signs and then look into reducing the speed. I'm not against or for the speed, I just think we need more public input than just a few of us here tonight deciding that. Because that will affect a lot of people.
You could take public comment, but generally, speed limits are not determined by public comment, but by the traffic engineering standards that say, you know, this range. I mean, maybe
That's
it's
true.
range.
Lisa, if you're going to traffic engineering standards, can we ask Jeremy, to come- how do you feel about, from a traffic engineer, professional opinion, going to 25 miles an hour?
This is where you get to say you haven't studied that.
Yeah.
Hey,
No,
do
I,
not lead the witness.
A witness,
Okay, yes.
the consultant.
Metaphor.
so I could go a long time on speed limits, but I won't. But state code does specify that speed limits are set primarily by the 85th percentile speeds. So a speed study on this road may not give you what you want, because you may find that the 85th percentile speeds are 35, and their speed study may
So
come
it may
back.
be counterproductive.
It may be
to do.
counterproductive.
What do you mean
Speed study on
80%? What do you mean 80%?
So what
So
so
the
they
85th
take actual data of how fast
They
people are
do
going,
it-
and then they say 85th percentile, you can't go lower than that?
So it's supposed to be posted
Regardless of
within,
the residential nature of a,
Well, that's
No.
the biggest bunch of bunk I've ever heard, because every road in town is far and ahead of that.
That's why
Go to
we don't,
Frontage
that's
Road,
why
go to
we don't do
Northwest.
studies.
yeah.
I'm sorry, that
That
makes
is
no
what,
sense.
so I'm just telling you what state code says, okay? State code says
whether
you
he agrees with it or
measure,
not.
yeah, whether you agree with it or not, says, and a lot of people don't agree with it, that you measure the speeds on the roadway, and that you find the 85th percentile speed, which means that 85% of the people driving on that road go that speed or lower, 15% go higher, and that the speed limit should be set within 5 miles per hour of that 85th percentile. Now, there are other factors to consider that are given in state code, such as
Design, speed, accident history, highway traffic, roadside conditions, and other safety factors.
yeah,
Well, there we go.
So can I ask you a
The
question?
reason we're
Then
here
how does
tonight
the-
is
How does the new
safety.
100-mile-an-hour push on the freeways affect that? Does that mean that all the speed limits are going up?
so there is a state statute that also says roads can't be posted higher than 80 on the freeway, and lower in other cases.
Now you're
So-
getting into hypotheticals.
So then there's other things, and then similarly, cities can post on their residential roads.
I'd actually
So, getting back to practical, Spencer, I think you can get the signs through pretty easily. The rest, I think, is subject to additional discussion.
And that's fine. That's why I wanted at least there to be a concrete recommendation that maybe we could come out of tonight with some go ahead, at least with something.
Okay, so let's pare those down. We're probably stepping over our bounds on trying to change speed limit, right? And I don't think anybody's in favor of the humps in the road, but it sounds like the signs that everybody's
Good idea.
everybody's staying with you up to that point in time.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the conclusion here.
Correct, and that's what I was trying to do.
Yes, yeah, and I appreciate you throwing out. So we're paring down from what you had that council's agreeing with for staff to go back and get us the prices on these and whatever else we need.
Are we recommending we're getting pricing on these, or are we recommending that we're doing?
We have the pricing on the sign.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we
So I
have
don't think
pricing
we
on
need
all
to get
This is a
pricing.
formal quote?
That's a formal quote, yes.
These are all formal quotes.
And we did add a little bit in there for miscellaneous stuff.
Contingency.
Not very much, but there is a little bit, right?
Yes.
Seems like we put a hair
2.5%
in there.
contingency, 5, 10?
Your Ruba fund's 10.
You get it.
$2.
Thank you, okay.
But hang on just one second.
But I still want to bid out, right? We'd still.
We'll use a state bid contractor.
Okay.
vendor.
I want to ask, so Kevin had mentioned maybe there would provide some safety for this curb extensions. I mean, if you're doing that, do you want to spend that much on the signs, or are they?
Well, I think that would be in addition to.
I think it would be an addition.
Is that, are you?
I don't think those are either or consideration, at least in my mind.
I want to hear what Kevin.
I think to Mike's point, that probably ought to be studied and maybe brought to a work session or back to city council meeting, and so that you have the estimates in front of you and you know what the cost might be. We don't have those estimates prepared.
And as much as
We
I'm
just-
just concerned about cost, I also would like to know from a safety standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's.
My bigger concern is just safety for neighbors, for north-south traffic, as well as now introducing again that east-west.
I think one of the things we have to be careful about is when we add the signs, we've got a lot of levers we're trying to pull here, and if you pull too many variables at the same time, you end up with no solution, right? And you don't know actually what solved the problem. So I'm very comfortable in saying, we pull the trigger on signs. We see what the impact of that is, and if additional things are necessary, you move forward with that. But I don't want to put too many variables into this. Drives my little engineering brain crazy thinking I won't know which one fixed the problem. Because as Robin's pointing out, this is not the only area in the city where this may be an issue.
Right.
And if we're doing too many things, I don't have a standard package to go apply somewhere else to solve the same problem.
Well, and it's hard
I
to,
mean, I could bring up, hey, while we're at it, can we add some flasher lights at 400 West?
Right.
And
Sure.
Porter Lane?
right. That's what I think is we can only throw so much money at this because if it was our only intersection in town, we could really make it nice, but it's not. And so we need to
I'm
make
not-
it safe.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I guess I'm just wondering, should we, and it doesn't sound like you guys think so, so I'm okay with that, but should we be vetting the safety issue of the curb extensions? Not necessarily, like, I'm not saying move ahead with the signage. I'm saying, should we table this and just investigate this a little further?
Table it completely?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, I mean,
so
sure.
don't do the signs?
Well, I agree with, George brings up a very good point, and I totally agree with him. You won't know which thing solved the problem, but, I mean, I feel like we got a report that had a lot of really great ideas, and we've discussed them, and we've talked about that. We think some might work, and some maybe not as good of an option, but, we're talking about combining some of those together, and what is the best. I mean, I think Mike presented a great memo on that, but Kevin has mentioned maybe these curb extensions would provide some additional safety.
But our experts.
I don't have a cost estimate on that.
But our expert's telling us that that's not what they're made for. He's saying you need to put them on 4th East, not on Chase Lane. I don't think they're gonna, to me, listening to all of the data, to put that curb cut is not gonna help somebody coming this way and turning.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. Jeremy, is that what you were saying? I didn't quite get that from what you had said, so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, to clarify, they're not typically used in this application, but it would increase your clear zone, which would provide some benefit of safety.
And George, to your point about which levers work and don't work.
Right.
I view the signs, not each individual sign as a lever. I see it as a sign.
I'm looking at it as a package, but like the curb extension.
No, and I agree with you. So that's good clarification.
Only one, and see what it does, because if
Yes.
it really does provide, I'm going to pick on Bill for a second, somewhere between 15 and 30% a reduction. I'm just having fun with you, Bill. If it's somewhere in there, that's great. That's an accident removed from the picture. If it does absolutely nothing, then we know that was the wrong solution. Because I can guarantee you, when other neighborhoods hear about this particular solution,
They're going to want it.
they're going to want it. I can picture the discussion we had about Jennings Lane and 400 and everything that went on related to the child safety issues there, and about kids nearly getting struck. And I can see this opening up a huge can of worms for us in terms of everyone wanting the same treatment.
Well,
that's going to be tough.
guess what, George? I heard something, a really great quote yesterday from Mayor Horrocks of North Salt Lake. We have all the tax money we need. We just have to get it out of the pockets of taxpayers if they want to fund it. We have all the funds we need. It's just whether they want to apply it to the project.
That sounds like Brian.
Yeah.
So if neighborhoods want it, great. In our next budget cycle, they're going to see a huge sign pack.
Well, I think we need to talk about
So
the
long
signs
as
and
we
get these
can
people some
provide
help.
evidence, to your point,
Yeah.
that it actually provides
That's
benefit.
and that's where
Measurable benefit.
that's why, going back to what I said, I don't want to do feel goods. I mean, I think that the council believes, at least I'm going to paraphrase what I think I've heard, that we believe this is going to have a positive impact that will probably reduce it. Great, purchase the package, monitor it, see if it does actually do that. And then that at least gives city staff a baseline for future recommendations where we have cars going through living rooms and other actions that we need to mitigate along the way. And you're right, it's going to cost money. But I'm also concerned about, you put too many of these in the city and you start ignoring them. Oh, another sign that's telling me I'm going too fast. Oh yeah, hey, my speedometer is still right. It still says I'm going the wrong speed,
That's a good point as well. We can't overdo it.
And
That said,
this is not your typical intersection.
No,
this is not your typical,
And I think
and
we all
that's just what I
recognize
was gonna say. This road starts in North Salt Lake and comes, and
Correct.
just weirdly ends.
So it sounds like Mayor Horrocks should give us some money, because it actually,
help
there's
us.
the source of it.
Well, he says he's got all the taxpayer money he needs.
Starts in his, next
Next time I see him, I'll mention.
I'll mention it to him as
Lisa, what were
well.
you gonna say? Sorry. You're about ready to say anything. You already forgotten it again, too? Oh, man.
Are you making a formal motion?
I will make
If
a
so,
formal motion.
Let me,
You want me
have
to
a
repeat it?
suggestion.
Yeah, you want a friendly
funding,
amendment?
well, we need a funding source. Where are we funding this from? So that's
Staff?
council contingency, reserves, where is it coming from?
Mayor, city council, where would you like to pull it from? Because we don't have it in our budget.
City staff on where we're gonna pull that from. Are we gonna pull that from our city council
I think
reserve?
it's gonna be from reserves, general fund
I
reserves.
think that's what Brant mentioned once, was reserve.
Brant, are you on with us?
He's virtual.
I know, but can we hear him talking?
I haven't heard him all night, so he was.
I will do my best interpretation, Brent. It says need a funding recommendation, budget amendment later, so we'll need to probably do it from,
Yes, and I agree.
I would say reserves right now, general fund reserves.
Just one thing, Mark, how long was the lead time on all that stuff?
6 to 8 weeks minimum.
Okay, so there you go.
That's in any reason.
So you have that much time to figure out where you get the money from.
So I think we've got it in general fund reserves, and we just say that that's this funding source, then staff is gonna have to bring a budget amendment, so that's where it's funded.
So do you want me to repeat this recommendation for everybody?
So before you do that, let me make
motion
one
for it.
other statement.
So,
I am in agreement with what you're saying until you got to the bump.
Okay.
However, I want to go on record as saying it's still going to be a feel-good measure as opposed to truly effective in stopping the problem. The only thing that's going to stop the problem is the barrier. I agree. One of the reasons that I agree is that the speed sign is portable and we can take it and use it in any of the neighborhoods that want it on a periodic basis. I see that as being a benefit. But comment about it's one more sign that's telling me I'm going too fast is the truth, and it makes the whole thing a feel-good measure.
And I don't think it's a feel-good measure, only insofar as we're reducing probabilities, not eliminating possibilities. So we're never going to eliminate the possibility that another accident occurs, but we're reducing probabilities, and that's our discussion. How much?
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
We'll find out.
But the barrier does remove the possibility.
Yeah, and nobody's recommended that from staff.
Yeah, they have. It said 2-foot stones in the, sunk a foot down in the ground.
Well, okay, I thought you meant the Jersey barriers.
No.
No.
Yeah.
I think the stones are the reasonably priced, short-term time frame.
That's why I recommended it. I still like that idea.
But Lisa,
insofar as-
I don't know
Lisa
if the
doesn't like
report
that.
evidences those boulders with a head-on. I think we had testimony that it works for a nice curve.
Can
but-
we request?
Yeah,
a
you can request
professional-
them to study it and have us
Okay.
look into it.
So, as part of my recommendation, so can I start over then and make a formal motion?
Well,
We okay with that?
I think what
And
you're about to
part of that
ask,
motion- and part
I
of that
would say
motion-
split it into two.
Yes, and
Not
part of that
giving-
motion will be
yeah.
to recommend to our engineering to
Well,
provide.
well, that's what I'm saying, split that out as a separate staff instruction, because I can agree to the signs, I can't agree
Gotcha.
to the other one.
Yeah.
Well,
I was
can
gonna
I-
No,
say,
I agree with
Yeah.
that. The
I don't-
motion would be that we're gonna recommend to staff, after these actual implementation, recommend to staff to go back and give us their professional recommendation or their professional advice on the boulders.
So can I say this on the boulders? It would be best for the city if those were considered private. So they're private landscape
Well,
boulders.
to Lisa's point,
Yes.
right?
That's
Well,
what,
I don't think there's a study that we're gonna come back with.
Okay.
But boulders, the recommendation is that those are
no
private.
engineering standard,
yeah.
They're landscape boulders,
because it is our public right-of-way.
but the.
So what you're
Yeah.
saying, Lisa, is if the resident wants to go ahead and put in boulders, Zollingers, put in boulders tomorrow. Is that kind of what you're saying? Because it's,
Well, I'll talk with our streets department, but yeah, it appears to meet code.
okay.
But those are privately owned, the property owners, they own it, or they don't own the park strip, but they maintain the park strip, and so that's considered
Correct.
a landscape private.
Landscape boulders, right? Okay.
The problem is we're getting them to fix a problem that they are not uniquely responsible for at their price, at their cost. And both city staff have suggested, and they have asked for some assistance in doing it. I think they're willing to do it, but you're looking at a price tag that's pretty substantial.
Well, and
Yes,
maybe
and
the
the
city
kind of
can
safety
find
there.
some boulders on some projects and donate them to the Zollingers, and they can be used. I don't
Donate them
think,
to the front yard and then they can move them to wherever they want to in the park strip?
Well, an example, we're gonna be building a new reservoir hopefully. As soon as we can get the money. I'm pretty sure where that site's at, we're gonna have some boulders. I don't know, I haven't talked with Kevin about this because
But they gotta be,
Yeah,
they're not boulders.
Can we
So-
solve
so-
the boulder thing later?
yeah, I was gonna say, I don't wanna go to,
No, and I don't wanna do that.
our natural rock is not an engineered rock, and I don't even wanna go there.
Correct.
I just don't.
Exactly.
Don't.
Yeah, no, my motion is not gonna, I'll make a motion. That we, one, install a speed limit driver feedback sign. Two, a stop sign flashing sign ahead, stop ahead flashing sign. Three, modify the existing stop sign to be a flashing stop sign. Four, to install a flashing double arrow sign on the north side of the intersection of 400 East and Chase Lane where the existing double arrow sign. Have I represented our council's
And that totals up to approximately, how much dollar amount?
15,000.
15.
approximately, equal to approximately
Okay.
$15,000.
Funded from,
Funded from, thank you, our general reserve.
second.
Motion and second.
Do we want to, any reason we're not including the high friction surface treatment?
Yeah, because I don't believe that's gonna work. With my massive streets knowledge. I don't know, that's one I would like to look at
I
and
didn't
get more data on
include
it.
that one yet because I think that one's another further.
That's another lever for
further
me.
study. Yeah, that's
Okay.
another one of the checklists I was trying to, that's why I haven't recommended it.
Okay.
Okay, so that sounds like that's all further discussion is done. Okay, so we have a motion and it was seconded. So you need to take a vote on it. Let's start with Councilwoman first, going to the right.
Aye.
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 Aye. So that motion passes unanimously. Thanks, staff. Thank you, Jeremy, for being here. Okay, Public Works vehicle purchase. Mark or Mike, did you guys want to talk about this?
Training ground.
So we've had a unique situation come up. Our vendor approached us a few weeks ago and said that a truck that we ordered that was scheduled to build late 20, what year, let's see, 22, 20, late 20, so we could pay for it in the next budget year. So we would purchase it in 23, the next budget year. For some reason, they're building the truck next month. And so what we're proposing is using funds that we've set aside for F-550 crew trucks in the street department to purchase that cabin chassis for the 10-wheel truck. The cabin, or the 550s are elusive creatures for some reason. We don't know when they're gonna build the ones we have on order. There's no obligation to us for what we have on order. So, questions?
We had 95,000 for that F-550, correct? Or was that the 550 crew truck, which was 600, or 60,000 apiece? Because that, in the budget, that's why I want to make sure I understand which 550 are we talking about?
So we're talking about two. Last budget year, we had a truck that was shared with the Parks Department that was funded to be replaced, but we haven't been able to get that truck. So that money should be held from last budget year, and that, I believe, is around the 65.
Nate, do you see why I'm asking that question? In our Fund 47 on page 57 of our budget, we've got item 2 and item 6 in our capital equipment detail, and I'm just trying to differentiate between the two and what Mark's asking.
Because there was 36,000 budgeted in streets, if I remember right, or 38, and then 36 in parks for that shared vehicle.
So item number 2 is the two 550s that got approved in this budget. Item number 6 came along with the 2 additional staff members that streets had requested. If we hired 2 new staff members, we'd have to hire 2 new, or we'd have to buy 2 new trucks. So you notice that that's on the department request column, but it did not go further than that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as far as this budget year, we would, since they can't get the 550s, we would use this, and basically we were gonna have to order the 10-wheel next year, and we were gonna order the 2 550s this year. Since they can't get the 550s this year, but had the opportunity to 10-wheel, they're asking to purchase the 10-wheel, which will come with a budget amendment this year, and then push the 550s off for a future year.
And Mark, just to clarify, because the 10-wheel dump truck with plow equipment was, the request, that was 278, but this says cab and chassis. What is?
That's just
In
basically,
layman's terms, what's the difference between cab and chassis versus?
so cabin chassis, the cab where the driver sits, and the back portion back to the back duals. There's no bed.
No bed, okay.
It's just cab and frame.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then you're gonna put current equipment on it?
No,
or
it will be
you gotta-
new equipment.
So we've still got to outfit it?
Yes, and that was what was mentioned in the memo as well. We'll need a budget, approximately $180,000 next budget year to build that truck completely.
When would this one get delivered?
They're saying snowplow equipment's a year plus out.
What are we gonna do with this cabin chassis in the meantime?
It will sit. But if we wait, it just pushes everything further down the
So
road.
then if you order it next year, you're another year out.
That's assuming you don't have any additional economic downturns, which, bankrupt suppliers or do other things in the interim.
Exactly.
They can build the box for the truck relatively quickly, but as far as getting hydraulics and stuff like that, they're 40, 50 weeks out just on hydraulic equipment.
Seems like a decent bird in hand, sort of situation. I mean, yeah, it does require a little CPA level 3 card Monte on the budget, but I don't see this as being a negative.
Yeah, so help us walk through the numbers on budget then, and maybe we need Nate back up here. As it relates to.
While he's coming up,
budget, as it relates to our approved budget and what we had left over from last year, do we really have left over?
I need to know what it costed. Kepler were just passed on the summary action.
So we have a grant sighting.
Walk through the numbers to help me understand how we're paying.
what I was just gonna add real quick is kind of what, go ahead, Nate. I'm not, only be a second, but the kind of thing that I'm seeing right now is, if you can get something, it's a good thing. We have meters and radios that we ordered last October, haven't seen them yet. The only thing that they've been giving me is the ones for the meter grant, so I can get that closed out. So in my estimation, it's like, we're just fumbling through trying to get what equipment we can get. If an opportunity rolls up, you kind of got to get it. Will Mark find the hydraulics? Well, there's a possibility we might find a spot. We kind of got to start building pieces to get to that point. That's kind of what I'm seeing with the market right now, and I think everybody else is as well.
If you don't get it, again, you're just gonna say in a year from now.
This truck was ordered.
Because everybody, it's not just our jurisdiction that's gonna be looking for this.
This truck was ordered a year ago.
Well, it's even that the group that we're looking at, the 3 water trucks right now, they're telling us they may not give it to us even though it's on state bid and not know that we've already ordered them as well. They're saying, no, they're gonna go fill the lots first because government doesn't make it.
If we don't take this one, I'm sure there's probably 5 or 6 or 10 jurisdictions after us that, yes, give it to us.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we're seeing and we're up against.
Just extending on Bill's question though, let's say you run into some supplier issue. This cabin and chassis has no utility until it's built out, right? You can't do anything with it.
No.
That's right.
We can't put an existing bed on it?
No, we don't have one.
Okay.
So risk-wise, pretty low?
Yeah.
Nate, you want to walk us through the numbers, just so we know what we have to...
Yeah. So the cost of this cabin chassis, in his background, he had $131,997. In the current budget for the 2 F550s, we had budgeted $95,000. So we would take that $95,000, put it towards the cabin chassis, then essentially we just have to use reserves to bridge the gap, that $37,000 approximately.
But we'll take it from Fund 47, right?
Mhm.
Not from our general fund?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
You got all your questions? The end of Mark and Nate?
Want me to make a motion?
Yes, sure.
I'll make a motion that we approve the purchase of the new 10-wheel cabin chassis for Public Works in the amount of $131,997.
Second.
Motion is second, further discussion? Let's do a roll call vote, starting with Councilman Summerhouse.
Aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0.
I'd like to thank our staff for being on that
Yep.
and getting it for us and watching out.
They're tough.
That is
Brutal
awesome.
right now.
Now your
Yeah.
challenge is to get some hydraulics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mike. All right, minutes, September 6th, 2022 work session. City Council and closed City Council minutes. Any change to those minutes? If not, a motion to approve?
Motion to accept the minutes as recorded.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, financial report. This is one of the months where we don't go through detail on it. We just do it quarterly. But is there any questions on the financial report for August 22, 2022 financial report? Nate's here to answer if there is. Okay, so let's move on to council report. Councilman McEwen.
So we had, obviously we're at the same work session. There's some really great things going on at the museum. I'm excited to see what they can do. You know, they were kind of hinting at the fact they would like to see some budget that gets assigned to them so they can extend their programming. I'm personally in support of that. I think that they're doing great work and we can extend a lot more of the services they're providing. So, something, we'll see what they can actually come back with. And to the questions that were asked, Spencer, like you were asking about what additional, I would like to see that full list and we could talk about it because they've been very creative over the years and I think there's more to be done. Switching over to mosquito abatement because that's everyone's favorite topic. Well, today we broke another record. It was 92 at the airport at 2:30. So mosquitoes continue to fly until the nighttime temperatures are lower than 50 degrees. We are continuing to do treatments at the district, so you could still call in and ask for spray requests. They were still doing nighttime fogging. The issue becomes the later we get into the year, the seasonal crews go home. The foggers don't necessarily do that because it's generally individuals who are picking up as the second job. So they'll continue the treatments. We have plenty of chemical. They'll continue to fly the plane for the practical time that they need to do that. But in theory, we are reaching the end of the season. There were some remarkable things this year in terms of our testing capability. One of the things that the board did several years ago was vote to build a PCR testing lab so they could do West Nile virus detection. We actually did more tests than the state of Colorado inside the county. So that's a pretty good milestone. So the surveillance is really good for the mosquito population that we have. Into next year, you're going to see some more drones flying. We own a large heavy lift drone that's used in small areas where you can't effectively fly an airplane. An airplane's really good if you have about 60 acres to cover, but you've got these really weird L-shaped parcels with phone lines and stuff like that that in the past, we treat those by hand with the four-wheelers that go out there and get stuck in the mud, and there's a lot of work to be done. We're now flying those with the drone. They flew over 2,000 acres of missions this year, which has proven to be very successful. So we're going to actually add a second drone crew next year and continue to improve upon that. So
there's a drone crew?
The drone crew consists of basically a spotter and a pilot. And so you go out in a team of two and you work that, and they have basically one of the trucks and trailer that contains the extra batteries so they can stay airborne. And they've done a really good job on optimizing. There was definitely a learning curve on that. You know, there's been a few bent propellers over time and things they need to learn how to do better. But the program has been very successful. We were one of the first in the state to adopt the drone technology, and now it's becoming pretty ubiquitous everywhere. And you keep seeing these larger and larger lift drones. Ours can fly about 35 pounds worth of product. The next one we're looking at will fly 55 pounds, so you're looking at much larger areas you can treat and stay aloft. So,
how have funds gone given our length of our season this year?
We're still okay. The mosquito abatement district, we're very fortunate to have Gary Hatch, the manager, lives in Centerville. Frankly, it is the best managed organization, penny for output that I've ever seen. So Gary does a really great job of rotating his fleet. So we're going to be okay on product. The big concern that we had during the pandemic was finding like plastics for testing. A lot of the products were shorted in terms of availability. One of the things that we're going to be running into in the next, I'd say 2 to 4 years is that you end up having the mosquitoes get a resistance to the insecticides that you're using over time. So the adulticides that work stop working and you have to keep switching out product. And so we're just about to switch out to another cycle of product. Well, we can have a whole discussion about Wolbachia on another time, but there's some pretty cool stuff going on related to that. But, yeah, effectively, the season will shut down. You can tell everybody, hey, look at the thermometer. Has it been under 50 degrees? Go ahead and go outside. It's fine. They've stopped flying. But, yeah, it's been a tough season because it's been very hot and dry, and that's increased it.
How accurate is that? Because early in the season, weren't spraying, and you were saying it because they weren't flying, but I was seeing them flying.
Yeah, and those were nights where it was over 50 degrees. So once it gets over 50, and there are early season ones like tree mosquitoes and stuff, but they mostly go after dogs. So it just depends. So you might see some flying that aren't actually biting humans; they're biting livestock. Of course, that brings the favorite term, which you're new to the council. I haven't told you this one yet, but we do have a term. It's called a sentinel chicken because they can get West Nile. So they're standing guard. So watch the chickens first. That's the report. If there's any additional questions, please.
How many West Nile pools? How many cases were there?
I need to pull the report. We did have some. We did get something that's not very frequent this year, which is equine encephalitis. That tends to be fatal. We did have a reported case of equine encephalitis in Weber County, but I can get the surveillance reports. For the next time, I'll just bring we get a national CDC report that includes what's going on in Utah. So I'll bring that along for the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilman.
Mayor, to add council stuff, last night.
Sure.
At our South Haven Rec Center, they approved the CRA, interlocal agreement for young power sports. Nominal, but at least.
Okay, good, great.
Yeah.
It's
I think, is
probably
that
the
everybody?
last one. I think the fire board was second to last.
Yeah.
Yeah. There might be one left, but I think
mosquito
that's it.
abatement finally approved it? They were asking about that last night.
I don't know. There was some confusion. I'll have to ask Brant because the district said they hadn't received it. And so I was talking back and forth. I don't think there's going to be a problem with the district approving it.
Right. They just,
Yeah, that was
they
the
were
other
just
one.
waiting on that one.
Yeah.
Jake was on the call. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other council reports that are critical at this time? Okay. Mayor's report. Bill, in answer to your question, Wasatch Integrated Waste Management, the blue cans from residential homes, that's only about a couple hours a day of their 8-hour shift of recycling. The rest is commercial recycling and recycling stuff that comes elsewhere. So it wasn't like those 2 shifts we're taking, all our residential garbage. So that was the answer to that one. We had a great day of service a couple weeks ago. There was, obviously, you could see what was done here at City Hall. I popped by here. I went by up Island View Park and what was done up there and on the east side of the cemetery. The packages that were put together over at the LDS Stake Center on Chase and Main. The blood drive that was done. It was just a great day of service. Many hands make light work, and there was especially at that Chase Lane in Maine, there was people from all over the city that gathered there, all different parts of the city. So that was neat. The preparedness fair this past Saturday, I spent most of the day down there. Our police staff did a great job pulling that together. The things that were brought in were fabulous as far as police and fire, and even a Blackhawk helicopter was there, and they had all this stuff showing what the government does to do for emergency preparedness. And in the middle of it all was all the exhibits for what we need to do as individually be financially prepared. So that was a great day. The 9/11 project, I hope you all had a chance to at least go walk through it. I took my daughter with me. She didn't remember it, only being 4. It was really moving for her. She's, I think, spent a lot more time than she would have, that she thought she was going to. So they did a fabulous job with it, and I talked to Jenny Taylor and Johnny Ferry and said this was the second one. They did it last year in Weber, and said, "You're going to continue to do this?" And they said they're talking next year out in the South Jordan area. And said, yeah, this needs to get out to all the counties. It was well done. I mean, for a traveling exhibit, for a permanent exhibit, it was fabulous. Then the last thing is, as part of my responsibilities on COG, I was assigned this year to be on a board that monitors money that's been, that the county would received years ago to new businesses that are Davis County businesses. I had never heard of it till I was on it, maybe you guys have, called the Davis Fund. And I asked them to get advertising information, so I will get it all out to you of who qualifies. Usually it's kind of a bridge loan type of thing, you know, the loans are $40,000-$50,000 and to help the Davis County business get going, and it's something that, like I said, until I was asked to be on the committee, had never heard of. So please keep that in mind for people you know within our city, people you know within Davis County, that are looking for some funding, and they got to be a Davis County-based business and Davis residents. So, and like I said, I'll get information out to you on that as far as specifics. That's my report. Any questions for me? Brent texted and said he did not have any report unless he is on and he just changed his mind. So there's no city manager report. If there's nothing else, I guess I'll.
No, motion to adjourn?
Yep. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Council's adjourned.